recording in progress. It's the weirdest thing. I hate when it does that. Hey Joe, how's it going?
What's up, Andrew? Good to be here.
Cool. Over this summer, I listened to an interview with John Corigliano, and he said the active decisions you make in composition are your techniques, and the decisions that you don't think about are where your voice comes through. How would you describe the voice that you imbue your music with?
Starting off with the big question, aren't we? So, wow. All right. Well, yeah, give me a hot second because it's like there are things I know I want to do with pieces. Like I know there are composers that like it takes time for them to when writing the piece to figure out okay what's going to happen. But then, like for me, like the way I'm just like not hardwired, but I'm a little crazy sometimes. It's like I know what I want to get out of this piece, or I know that this piece I want to challenge myself or get better at writing this kind of thing, and because you know there's always like that unique voice that can stem from that, and so because so yeah, there are decisions I make in pieces, and then there are things that come out of it that I don't even expect. Like it just happens like simultaneously as I'm trying to you're focusing on one thing, and that's kind of like a lesson that I kind of tell myself with life that I've actually had experience with. Where like the best things come when you least expect it, but you're not actively focused on trying to find those great things when you're basically when you just working with what you have and where you are instead of looking so far ahead. Then you'll get surprised by something amazing or something worthwhile. But remind me of the question because I'm not sure if I answered that correctly or stand away.
I think that's I think you answered it in a really interesting way. So the question was what how do you imbue your pieces with your voice?
How
And
do I
when John Corigliano described the voice, he talked about it as like the decisions in your music making that you or your music
Yes.
writing that you don't think about.
Yes. So there are. So I guess I'm allowed to talk about these examples for one.
Dude, you can do whatever you want. There's
Okay,
no
I can do whatever I
rules.
want. Okay, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so oh gosh, which piece would it be? I mean, it happens in every piece. I'm trying to find one that was like I actually did have a memorable experience with the writing, like the decisions I made. So let's talk about my most recent one, my Joy of the Soul. So I knew when I was approached by Diane Witchery for this commission that it needed to be upbeat, fast, and lively. And of course, with me knowing like the stuff that I like to listen to, which is or stuff I grew up with, that was very uh, vital to my music education. Was, the energy of marching band shows or energy of drum corps, like just those ways of storytelling through loud and also even soft and lyrical energy, like and fast
Mm,
pace. Like it was that really left an imprint on me as to how they're really useful at building and weighting energy
yeah.
and making it feel wanted. But of course, there's some of that you have to be careful when you're writing for different mediums because some stuff has to be outside. And then when you try to write inside, you got a little delicate. Like you can still match that energy. You just
Mm,
can't do it exactly. It's not
yeah.
can't carbon copy it. But to answer the more to go back to the questions, like there's a spot there's a spot in towards the end that I knew I wanted to do, but I didn't know how to do it just yet. Because I think in climaxes a lot. Like I think I like to see the big pictures, like even the smaller big picture, like all the climaxes, big and small. That's this is how I've been thinking a lot about like when I'm trying to write pieces. Like it's never too linearly for me. I do my best, but then there are times like this section actually would work better towards the end, or I can see this working somewhere else. So I write those, and then I sort of like deconstruct them. Like once I
Mm.
have like that, because most of the time they come to me fully scored, or at least you know,
Whoa,
or at least
that's awesome.
or at least partially scored. Let's say partially because like I always make tons. We all make tons of tweaks to our stuff. Like
Yeah.
even when the piece is done, it's performed, we're always still making like small little like either it's orchestrational or small little notes. Like it's the smallest things, and I'm always crazy with that. So they come to me partially to fully scored, and I jot it down. And of course, I I, I experiment around with that. I try all these different things, and and then when you listen to it back, you just that point where it's like let's say like a golden measure, or maybe someone would say like in like a film scene like the Hollywood shot, or it's
Mm,
like that one measure that just like tells you the whole story of the piece in one measure. or it tells you, oh, this is all what this has been building to, that final climax. And is is a time where it's like, wow, I would not expect, at least from a MIDI point of view, for this to be able to
Mm.
encapsulate this much emotion. Like I knew, like, okay, I wanted this line here, I wanted some counter melody, I want a little bit of support here, or okay, I want some motion in these voices to help balance that, or keep it from slowing down. And then you put the piece together, and then there's so much more that comes out of that. Like you get, like, there's an emotion you're probably trying to get for, but then when you listen to it, you get a lot more from that. Like it does more than you
Mhm.
thought it would, and it's like, oh. And then what's even better is that, of course, I haven't experienced this yet, which I'm very excited for. Like when I actually go there in April to hear it, because with Through the Bay, yeah, I had MIDI, and the MIDI was sounding great from my end. It's like, okay, this is great. It's great interpretation to help
Mhm.
communicate to directors and
Yeah.
musicians. And then I go to JMU, last October, and hear it, and I mean, it was different. Like
Yeah.
I mean, it sounded different to me, but yet it was what I wanted. And
Mm.
the students
Yeah.
were giving so much energy to it. Like I was telling them, we give more energy. Like, yeah, right notes are cool and all, but those right notes will mean nothing if you didn't play them with conviction.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, there's like a very famous quote from Beethoven where he talks about how like he can tolerate a few mistakes. What he can't tolerate is a student playing with a lack of musicality or a lack of passion, because like
Absolutely.
the I taught public speaking last semester, and one of the things
Oh,
that I
wow.
told my students a lot is like, if like the vulnerability of you being in the hot seat and going for it and communicating exactly what you mean, we'll miss the mistakes that you pick up because you know the material and you built it.
Absolutely.
But what we will be left with was the profound experience of watching you deliver that speech with conviction because you knew it and you tried with all of your energy to communicate exactly what you meant. And that's
Absolutely.
very powerful. And I really think music performance is the same.
Exactly. It's like, and I'm very grateful to see that's working. I'm glad that I've been able to, like, see that. I was like, oh right, I've never really cared a whole lot about, getting all the right notes, or making sure musicians were getting everything correct. Like it
Yes.
really was more just the actual conviction and the storytelling, being acting as the storytellers.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a great example for folks that are listening. If you want to see like an imperfect performance, technically that is perfect in its is actually perfect in its execution. There's a recording of Ryan Anthony, who's the former principal trumpet of the Dallas Symphony and one of the trumpets of Canadian Brass. He was diagnosed with like a really rare blood cancer, and so he founded this charity to raise money and awareness for this rare form of cancer with like the remaining days that he had, because I think he only had like 2 or 3 years to live after he was diagnosed. This is crazy. And like he like harnessed all of his musical connections to put on these huge concerts for it. And there's one that's like, I think a few months before he died, and you can really tell that he's on death's door, and he plays Ennio Morricone's solo Gabriel's oboe on piccolo trumpet with orchestra. And yeah, it's not technically perfect, it's emotionally perfect. every
Emotionally
every
perfect.
ounce of musicality that he's capable of is in that performance, and it's one of the most profound videos on YouTube, I think.
Absolutely. Wow. Emotionally perfect. That's very striking, profound. It's
Yeah.
awesome.
So, Joe, we were talking a little bit about this before we started recording, about like what
Mm-hmm.
makes something profound. What do you think makes a piece of music profound?
Well, no, you would have to, like, think about what, well, at least from the English dictionary, what does profound actually mean? Like, what does it actually say?
Mm.
And so you see, definitions mean, very great or intense. Okay, so great. What is a great in? What is a great with or intense? And of course, I think this idea can be shared by, a lot of musicians, right? Great referring to, positive, or
Mhm.
great referring to an experience that is worthwhile, something that, because I never want to write a piece that would feel like it's a burden to anyone to listen to. I never want to make people
Yeah.
feel worse about themselves after listening to my music, or
Hmm.
make them question things I guess I never really intended them to question, or in a way that would not help them in their lives. Like I'm every year I'm finally realizing, my current, going philosophy, that I just want to make people feel a little bit better than when they came into the concert hall or whatever performance space is happening. and and if it does, cool. I'm very, very glad I can, help you smile a little bit, or give you an
Mm,
experience that, again, is worthwhile. And
yeah,
so yeah, I think that's probably what I would think of something that's profound, like something that is worthwhile experiencing. Like, yeah, it can be positive, or it can make you feel mostly
yeah,
sad or something, but something that's like,
yeah,
no, I'm grateful that I got to experience this. uh, yeah, I'll say that for now.
yeah. Yeah, I like to think about it the same way. I try to write music that's emotionally very gratifying, whether it's like trying to express something that's like profound sadness or childlike wonder and like magic, or something that's hopeful, something that's powerful. Like
Yeah,
we have, I mean, we have so many adjectives that we can go to, but like there are feelings that like are not easily captured by words. There's like, and I think there's the emotional gratitude of being able to express something like that as music is really one of the things that makes it universal.
exactly. And that's just like, the power of music. And of course, well, I think we're talking about a lot when it comes to emotion, right? It was like musical storytelling. Now, a piece doesn't have to tell a story to give an emotion, but of course, emotion can also, but I think I argue it could in turn invoke a story, right?
Yes.
Perhaps. And so, it's just the power of like, because when we want one of my things emotionally gratifying, or to tell a story, like I know for one, and perhaps you can share some similar thoughts on this, Andrew, is that like I have big ambitions, and I try to really work hard to balance those. Realize, okay, what is actually realistic right now, and what something that maybe I could do later, as long as, if I'm planning carefully or taking my time with it, right? And so, like, there's this idea where, like, I want to create music or an experience. I don't know how it's going to be presented yet, but I wanted to invoke almost like, like an actual story, like
Yeah.
characters, subplots, like almost creating like an own like cinematic universe. But there's no film. There's only music and sound as well. I think sound design is also a really cool thing that you can utilize as well. Not saying that it needs to be there, of course, but
Mhm.
again, it can be a nice, like, combination, another tool of storytelling that I'm definitely, like, highly interested in. So, like, yeah, I just want to, like, really do my best to invoke the images of, or, the story, the comic book page, the
Mhm.
story pages that's happening with just music. So, like, writing music that, like sounds like people talking. It sounds like a character, talking or sharing their thoughts about whatever they're experiencing at the moment, and being able to converse with other characters as well. Maybe they'll be represented by certain instruments, or an actual certain collection of timbres representing
Yeah.
a character. I don't know. Like, I'm getting all these, like, ideas, and I'm really excited because I'm going to be working on that in these next few years, and, at least in a way, as an approachable way first to test the waters. I mean, pretty much
Yeah.
my way of testing the waters are these current pieces. Like Joy of the Soul is literally about me being excited by getting my very first professional orchestra commission. Like, I didn't realize that till the very end with my lessons with Omar Thomas, and he made me realize, oh, this piece is what is technically literally about me. Like, I wasn't trying it to be about me. I knew the piece had to be exciting. I wanted it, and I felt like, I had this is a piece that, well, because orchestra, like, probably some people can share. It's a different world to get into. It's
Yeah.
different, and I feel
Yeah.
like with different roles and different things that you have to know and understand and be aware of to really get a good solid, foothold into the orchestra
Yeah.
medium. And so with that, like, I felt like, oh, I need to, prove myself. I guess I already proved myself by getting that commission,
Yeah.
but yeah, I still feel like I still had more to prove, especially, with people who are going to be hearing this music for the first time. Because on that concert is also Beethoven 9 and Florence Price and Adolf Hailstork. Like, I am literally,
Oh, dude, holy cats.
I am the pre-show. It's the finale. This is the finale of their season, April
Wow,
13th and
that's
14th.
awesome.
Tickets available now, but I'm third in the program. It starts with
That's sick, man.
Hailstork's Fanfare and Amazing Grace. Then it goes to Florence Price's Andante Cantabile for string orchestra. Then it's
Wow.
my piece, and then there's actually a youth orchestra that Diane Ritchie, she's actually a composer herself. uh, wrote as well. And then intermission, and then Beethoven 9 to close out their 2023-2024 season. I'm like, I am pre-gaming for Beethoven. Like
Yeah, that's
that is
cool.
a crazy feat. And so yes, as you can imagine from the emotions that I
Yeah, holy cats,
witness
man.
right now, it's like I feel like I have to prove myself. I have to like really make a statement, because like this is, I want to make it known that this is only the beginning.
Yeah,
This is like I hear with the one and done, like, no, this is Joe Jackson. This is the start of something
that's awesome, man.
hopefully profound, as we've been talking about.
Yeah,
But I don't want to go, but I just want to make some good music and get, connect with my audience.
that's
But
awesome, man.
yeah.
I was really struck by the analogy you made to like having side characters in a story in your piece.
Mhm.
What do you think about when you're planning a new piece of music, and like how do you incorporate those like
Mhm.
interdisciplinary mechanisms into
Yeah.
manifesting the music you hear in your brain into reality?
Golly, sounds like a question. We should probably do another podcast in like three. I'm down to do this whenever, but like I think that this question definitely needs to be asked in like 3 years from now,
Yeah.
after I would have actually have written a
Well,
piece. But
I think it'd be
well,
really cool to have like
no,
something right now, and then we can revisit it again later. Because
yes,
I
yeah,
think it would be really interesting to see how your perspective changes.
absolutely. So I do have something to talk about, but yes, but I'm definitely interested in revisiting this question. Yes, in 3 years, when I'm actually going directly into. But I have pieces that have been testing that waters. I have been sort of building to that, because perhaps I've always been thinking about this, but I never really made that acknowledgement and acceptance of it until this year, this semester. So like through the bay, right, for full orchestra. It, I mean, it tells us the story of, well, of experiencing something new, and how like when we experience something new, our imaginations, our emotions can often tend to be exaggerated, either positive or negative. But of course, in this case, it was overwhelmingly positive. With you really get sensitive to the sounds of the waves, and then the sounds of the sirens saying, "Oh, all right, the ferry's about to leave now," and then it's the start of this little adventure. And then it just gives you the image of like the trees on either side. It's this big channel, and you see like tall trees on either side, and you see people like playing out in canoes and boats out in the water, and it's just like, it is absolutely amazing. Like, so my ability to at least write in terms of landscaping, building the setting, I
Mm,
think it's like I'm sort of like building the pieces, right? I'm figuring out the pieces, because now, like right now, I'm figuring out how to like, well, it's how I like to build my settings. How do I build the
mm,
landscapes, build the world building? Oh my gosh, like like what I talked about before. Like I want to write a piece that tells you how green the grass is. Like, oh, like
mm-hmm.
here's a world that
Yeah.
tells you how green the grass is, how tall it is, how blue the sky is, what is like the ruggedness of the hills, all communicated through sounds and timbres. Because
Mm,
yeah, like pitches and harmonies are cool, but it's also a tool, right? Because you also
mm-hmm.
have sounds and a combination of sounds and timbres of the
Mm,
different instruments that I think also have just as much stake into creating these sounds as well. Again, it's not just pitches, but it's also the sound that the pitch is being communicated through, right? Whether it's our instruments or our voices. And so I don't know, it's just, how do I think about that? Because I just think it in my head, man.
yeah.
I try to visualize that bay, and I diddle around in my head. Like I try to
Mm-hmm.
come up with a motive or some sort of like sound world, and then
Yeah.
right, and that started forming, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, this is energetic, because I knew I wanted it, because that piece was specifically supposed to be written for advanced youth orchestras and collegiates. So I knew like there were some limits to that, but
Mm-hmm.
it was not harmful at all to me, because even though it was still hard
Yeah.
when I finished. Yeah, because that's apparently me. Like, I know the instruments too well that I tend to write stuff just at the edge that challenges them. That's not out of
Yeah.
reach, but it's that good challenge point for where the musicians are at their time of their
Mm-hmm.
career and lineage.
Yeah. Have you ever studied like how to write stories?
That's actually something I've been thinking about a lot. But I will say this: like I've been actually learning bits and pieces from I mean the stuff I watch on YouTube. So like I watch a lot of
Yeah.
game theory. I or if you know about Matthew Patrick and his whole like
Yeah.
the theorist channels on YouTube, like I watched a lot of those. And then when FNAF,
Yeah.
Five Nights at Freddy's came out in 2014, and it challenged, and of course those two pairings, like watching, how the creator of the game, Scott Cawthon, is how he's able to tell story. Like, I mean, he didn't even know what the story was going to be from the first game. Like, it was his Hail
Yeah.
Mary because when he was working at Dollar General, and he was like making these Christian games, but like
Mhm.
he had one last hope before he was going to give up making games, and that was Five Nights at Freddy's. And man, as you know, that game took
Yeah, it's
storm.
huge.
It's huge now with the lore and like how he was able to build a story, like saying where
Yeah.
from all the theories, it just sets yourself right in the middle of it. And then with the future games he makes, it's all either prequels or futures, and it's all little hints to help you try and piece that story together.
Yeah.
And so it's things like that. And then of course I've been a FNAF fan. Well, it's actually it'll be their 10th anniversary this year in August. So I guess I've technically been a fan for a
Wow.
decade, which is crazy,
Yeah.
absolutely crazy to think about. But it's because of that, and I watch people theorize and think about different stories, seeing how the different evidence can lead, how the same evidence can lead to different story directions. Like,
Yeah.
it's stuff like that that's definitely helping me realize or learn. I'm learning a little bit more about very certain nuances.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays, since I'm actually being more serious about it, like, oh, actually I do want to write a story. Like, I
Yeah.
really want to like build a world, and write some relatable characters, and have them go on a journey that can perhaps be obviously
Yeah.
exhilarating, worthwhile, but also perhaps maybe have some you know nuanced life lessons along the way, or something that
Yeah.
makes you feel like, oh, I learned something from this. But yeah, and so I think I'm interested in like probably taking it a little more seriously, probably
Mhm.
finding at least talking to friends I know that are probably have more roots with storytelling, but maybe even
Yeah.
doing some online research of my own, at least for the time period until I find the right way. But I
I
think
think
I'm in a okay
there's
place to start.
yeah, I think there's so many resources on YouTube that like it's kind of overwhelming. I think you could probably spend the rest of your life on YouTube watching just like videos on how to write a better story because of how many resources are available now.
Oh yeah.
The one of the best ones I found, I was so surprised when I saw this. It was with the writers of South Park.
Hmm.
And I mean, like when you talk about like successful comedy writers, hard to make an argument that there are people more successful than them. And one of the things they talked about is how like the the death sentence for a writing career is thinking about a story as like this happens, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And like you can make a story infinitely more complex if you just change one little thing about, well, two little things about that is
Mm-hmm.
this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens.
Yep.
And
Continuities.
having all of those things not only have a tether, but so it's like they don't become disjointed. They flow, and there's reason behind everything, and there's chaos as a result of that, and it feels like real life. I came across
Yes.
a quote by a Russian writer named Alexander Solzhenitsyn
Ooh.
recently. And the quote is, "If there's a rifle hanging on the wall in Act One, it should be fired in Act Two, or it shouldn't be there."
I recognize that.
And like I've really started to think about that a lot more, especially in my music writing. Like, okay, if I only use a motive for one movement, is does it have a lot of value? Should I use it in
Mm-hmm.
another place, or why? Like, interior is really
Yes.
difficult for that, and I think part of the reason I didn't do it so much in that piece is on purpose, because I was trying to say like, okay, how can I set a single melody four different ways in one piece and hide from the audience that it's the same melody the whole time.
Absolutely. That's actually an idea I have for a piece coming up. I can't talk about it yet; it's too early. But I will be glad to pop on again, maybe March. Because I actually don't know when the release schedule comes out for this particular orchestra.
Yeah.
But this particular orchestra commissioned me, and they and I had an idea of like writing about four people, and there's gonna be this one like ode to him that's very prevalent between all of them. Something that's very well known, but break it up into four distinct motives and actually alternate a little bit, so it's not so obvious in the beginning, but at the end
Hmm.
they all come together. and
Yeah.
sort of it's like a celebration of life. But I will definitely be able to talk a lot more in more detail with a lot more specificities and
Yeah.
names, perhaps post March. So be looking out for that. But I will say as well, like you said with the quote, the rifle, if you see a rifle in Act One, it should be fired in future acts. Like that's how I thought it was Safety of Flooded Heart.
Mm-hmm.
So now, so let me talk to you about that piece. So Safety of
Yeah.
Flooded Heart. I mean, it came out of the pandemic. Like I knew I wanted to write a band piece because my school, Jamie, we had a wind band competition contest every year, and of course I love band, and I was so sold on trying to write a piece that would hopefully be seen as a qualified candidate, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always working hard and trying to write a band piece every year, and so when the pandemic happened, of course, we all had our fair amount of losses and
Yeah.
grievances, and excuse me, dark days and or months, and that was no. I had no exception for that. I had my dark days, but I was able to get myself out of that before it consumed me and put all that energy that would have consumed me into my work, because I knew that the more raw emotion you put into a piece, the more like evoking it would be. Like
Yes.
I'm sure there's probably like more facts of that, but it seemed pretty direct to me, and based on my own experience with a appearance on the piece, that it does seem to be the case, or at least the relationship is very obvious there. But to continue on, so another one of those COVID pieces I wrote was a band piece called later called Safety of Flooded Heart, and it actually starts out with foreshadowing. So the beginning of the piece foreshadows like the chaos that happens when the first wave hits. The whole, but actually it's kind of like it's a little bit of its own tone poem, I guess technically, because
Mm-hmm.
it starts like I mean, I really do tell it in like a series of chronological events. It starts in the timeline period from like summer of 2019, and it ends like summer of 2020, or up until like the fall of 2020, and so like so after that foreshadowing moment, it calms down, and so like the calming summer and heated summer of 2019. Oh yeah, heat isn't weather,
Yeah.
and then then you start hearing like these motifs. Like I actually created a COVID motif, and since it's called COVID-19, I use my good old theory knowledge and use the pitch clock to assign 2019 to the pitches. So you
Yes.
get that. Yes, my moment to use set theory. Let's go. My one and done. Nah, there'll be some
Nice.
more in the future, but I do enjoy set theory a little bit
Me
and
too.
cool things. No, I do enjoy it. I think all music is music. It's just
Mm-hmm.
I'm small tangent, but I'll get back. I promise, because I'm
Yeah.
sure we'll talk about it more. But like I tell people, and again, I'm learning a lot of this myself still. So like I'm no crazy expert, but I keep seeing this happen again and again. That it's reaffirming a lot of things for me, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It's like anything, like music can be music. You can find this cool sound that
Mm-hmm.
perhaps it takes a little effort to get from for an instrument to get out of, that may sound silly out of context or out of context, but it's all about how you deliver these new
Mm-hmm.
ideas or sounds,
Yeah.
especially if you're trying to get become renowned, or again, because it's not like I want to get, it's not like I want to be famous, but like I have to be well known for my business, for my career, to have multiple groups play my pieces so that I could
Yeah.
get potentially money from that, so I can go about my life and be able to
Mm-hmm.
continue to create more experiences for people.
Yeah.
So I do have to pay attention to that. So it's like, so as that's why I'm pretty slow when it comes to like aesthetic techniques and stuff. I mean, safety actually has some aleatoric, some out of
Yeah.
bounds kind of things, which I intentionally wanted to. I wanted to test it
Mm-hmm.
out. I wanted to get my experience with that. Like, okay, this is the time for me to do that. So anyway, back to the piece. So of course, so you get a little bit of hints like overseas, because it hasn't hit America yet. You hear that motif, oh god, dun 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 dun, right there you go. I remember the pitches, and we start to worry about it. So it's not like early winter. This is like late November, early December, and we start to worry about it because we hear about all stuff's happening over there in China, and it's starting to spread a lot throughout the neighboring countries. I'm like, oh, will this ever hit us? But and so and while we're always dealing with these questions, we then well, it's the holiday season. What no better way to get our minds off it, since it's not here? Maybe we shouldn't worry about it so much, especially if we don't have actually any direct way to be involved or help out. is to listen to some holiday jams. And so the next section is like what helps me give context to put in an actual jazz chart. It's a little
Yeah.
bit jazz chart, and get some nice little medium fast swing in there with and using that beautiful melody from earlier. Like it was like the heat, the middle of summer. There's that first like big piece climax right after the foreshadowing, and it builds into the and you get the count on horns. It's glorious. It's beautiful, bellissimo. And so I take that melody and I turn to a jazz chart. I turn to the tune, as the cats like to call it. I make it a tune, and it's my way of putting it. So it works from a narrative context. Like, yeah, it's kind of weird to for my natural cinematic post tonal harmonic language that is like it's my kind of like my default nowadays. And then to have context to work for actually functional formative heavily formed jazz
Mhm.
chart. It's stories are the greatest way to really have a whole lot of variety in one package.
Yeah.
I think I mean it's not an excuse, but it's a great outlet for that. And I
Yeah.
think that's where I like a lot of my strengths lie.
A quick aside on that. When
Yes.
I think about the most entertaining piece of concert music I've ever heard, I think it's really
Mm-hmm.
hard to make an argument that it is anything other than The Rite of Spring. And like, as you think about The Rite of Spring, The Rite of Spring is a two-scene ballet. That's
Mm-hmm.
so short. But like it's really funny. I got to see the Chicago Symphony play The Rite of Spring in
Wow.
November of this last year. Awesome show. Um I have a miniature score of it and I brought it along just because I wanted to see if I could
Yeah.
follow along in real time and it
Uh,
flies by like a literal page turner. Like less than a second sometimes on a page before you're flipping it. It's crazy.
wow.
And like the, so the Rite of Spring is roughly 28 to 32 minutes, and I felt like it was 6.
Wow.
It went so
Wow.
fast. It was
Exactly.
crazy.
No,
And
yeah.
but I think that's the power. That's the power of
No.
having these even such a short story like these two little scenes where like this village wakes up and they're like, "Oh, it's spring, time for the ritual sacrifice." And then the ritual sacrifice and then it's done. But like he pull every little detail, every moment in the story is so interestingly curated, and then it flies by like that. It's
That's the thing.
but there's also so much time, as you were just saying, like for all of these interesting beats to happen. I think you're right, and I think it's a really interesting way to like keep people's brains focused on the music because like if if you take too long with like it can be really gratifying to take your time with gestures on occasion, but like sometimes
Absolutely.
people don't want to pay you that much due or it's really difficult to
Hmm.
because like it can be tough to stay focused when you're sitting in a chair sometimes.
Exactly. It's like even like for me, like even when I'm at my own concerts nowadays, like I'm feeling it more and more these days. Where like I wish I could get up and walk around. Like I wish
Mm,
I could like it feels. I mean, maybe it's just I just have long legs with knees that need to pop every second because if they stay
yeah.
locked for too sit for too long, like unless I'm in an aisle seat, then in that case I can survive. But it's like I wish I could like walk around and stand in the back, or obviously somewhere where I'm not disruptive to the musicians, but like sitting down, like I don't know,
Yeah.
it gets me less and less. But it's like, but like you're right. It's like being able to do so much, but yet it goes by so quickly. But like that's really good. I mean, not just storytelling, but also proportioning of the sections,
Yes.
and also the pacing as well. Which is quite something like all like every composer, or even not just composer, but any musician, songwriter is always a challenge that we do get better with time and experience. Like how to actually
Yeah.
pace things, knowing okay, this has gone on long enough. Let's move on to something else, or
Yeah.
let's slightly deviate, or
Mhm.
knowing that okay, how much to do in this one bit, whether it's fully climactic with less layers or one singular line
Yeah.
that delves like it's a constant balancing act, and I think
Yeah.
it will always be different for every piece. Like you can't
Yeah.
find a formula for that. Maybe in terms of the steps, but it can't be like the
Mhm.
exact thing for every piece, or else it'll actually won't work.
Mhm.
At least
Do you
for me.
write? So I mean I don't know tons of your music, but like
Mm-hmm.
what do you do? when you want to write a really long gesture to keep people invested?
Mm-hmm. A really long gesture. Do I have any pieces that do that? Because I know, like, 'cause in my lessons, I worry too much about having things stay for too long, so I actually run into the opposite problem of not having things last long enough, and having too many good things, but they it's too short. They're all short lived. That's the biggest problem that I'm now, getting that balance back, and but hoping to definitely take more advantage of with these future pieces where I definitely want to take more time. But
Hmm.
again, it's a challenge every time. But
Yeah,
thinking about your question, it's like, how would I approach it? Well, I have to think about what is it supposed to do. I have to
yeah,
think, okay, well, why am I writing a gesture in the first place? What is it supposed to do? Like, because again, I think a lot about stories in my piece. Like, I think, like, I've never, well, I can't say I've never. I think that word needs to be banned. Like, it's it's always been like less. I think in my early days, right, early days
hmm,
of composing, like where like, you know, there's a method composition where you think about, process only, or like, or concept, and then following some deviation of classical forms, or whatever, to, try and make a story out of that. But for me, like, the story is like kind of almost there, or at least I make it more overt that it's a
yeah,
story versus, a, a heavily formed, rondo sonata. But
yeah,
not that rondos aren't cool, like rondos are fun,
yeah,
but like, but for me, it's like, I want things like, I form things how I feel like they need to be length, and of course, again, I
yeah,
tweak, I balance to feel like, okay, and then of course I share with, friends I trust, to make sure, like, because I feel like there are times where, like, with every piece, like, because I know what I'm writing, I know what I'm trying to do. Like, the first impression side of my ear goes away. Like it kind of comes back when I take breaks from like a specific piece, and I come back to it after like maybe days or maybe a week after touching it, and I get, a first impression again, and I'm able to hear, oh, okay, this was this didn't sound wrong before, but now it sounds crazy out of place now, or
yeah,
out of proportion. So I guess, like, to go back to answering the question, is, well, you gotta think about what it's supposed to do.
mm,
You gotta think about, now. You could probably, now this is the glory with, experimentation. Like, well,
yeah,
just write something and see, okay, what does it do? Like, maybe you don't have a story, right?
yeah,
Just write out a gesture, and you try to think about it. Like, you listen back and, okay, what does this feel like it's doing? Does it feel stasis for a reason? Do I want it to be static there? Because again, it's all about what you want your audience to get. If you want it to feel
yeah.
stasis, if you want your audience to feel that way, then you got it. But if that's not your intention, then that's when you probably need to start, change, looking at some spots and saying, okay, what could I change here? So I
Mhm.
think it's all about, your purpose, and then your actual reaction. What do you want to get out
Yeah.
of it?
I so I was struck by this thought a couple weeks ago. Because there are a lot of people who will like decry the fact that like composers use MIDI playback as so frequently. But I think it's really powerful to have such an eerily accurate facsimile of what the piece will actually sound like, because it allows you to try the experiment like a lot of times before you put it in front of a group for the first time. And
Absolutely.
really, it really lets you hone what's happening, especially when there's like an impossible number of layers to execute on a piano. Like I recently finished a reduction of my concerto for euphonium and orchestra, and
Uh-huh.
there were sections where the orchestra has 9 layers happening. It's
Uh-huh.
like how do you do 9 layers on piano? It's and what I came to learn is that it's basically impossible.
Mm-hmm.
You have to wholesale cut a bunch of stuff and then figure out what like 2 to 5 things can I capture either with two harmonized voices playing independently at once, or where I can have two harmonized voices that then switch to two other harmonized voices every other measure. So you can get like a facsimile of all of the textures happening in like a
Absolutely.
weird scrapbooking effect. And it's like, it's kind of cool to be able to do something like that, even though I wouldn't necessarily want to. But like, I don't know. I think being able to run that experiment and figure out if it is exactly what you want is actually really important. That's you just reminded me of that while you were saying that.
No, absolutely. And I'll also talk about this too. Like, yeah, I rely a lot on MIDI playback because, like, I mean, there are a lot of things that because with, and of course, their programs are getting smarter, every year, and
Mm.
they're figuring out how to program different things that we see. But like, I'm when it comes to like experimental stuff, like there are things I'm gonna try out, and like there are electronic stuff like I have no idea how they're gonna sound because the
Yeah.
computer doesn't know how to program that. Now you
Yeah.
could probably, I mean, it will take more work, but you could like program, or you could actually notate an interpretation of those things, right? To
Yeah.
give you some sort of thing. But I mean, I don't do that. I try to hear in my head and
Yeah.
work with what I have with the musicians. But I think that's not worth putting all that doing for all that time. But I I rely a lot on my MIDI play because yeah, I want to make
Yeah.
sure it's because again it's getting better every year with the samples as well.
Mm-hmm.
I rely because it helps a lot with again convincing and showing conductors and directors ensembles hearing what you're trying to tell them because like
Yeah.
and again, and the better sounds that you can get, the more accurate interpretation you can get. Now, even then, when
Yeah.
you have it performed by a live group, it will still sound very different. Well, like
Yeah.
nine times,
It
like
has to.
probably 99, it actually has to. Even with like AI programs like No Performer, or at least AI inspired, not fully AI because we're
Yeah.
in that time period now, but where like it kind of helped, like where no form actually helps you a little bit with like some phrasing based on what you've written and trying
Yeah.
to think, oh, what are you thinking about this kind of expression or interpretation? Now that helps me. That does help
Mm.
me a lot because there's some things that can't be notated. There are some things that are strictly reliant on the musicians and their backstories
Yeah.
funneling into how they play their instrument, and that
Yeah.
gives more emotion. And so, while I
Yeah.
do, yeah,
Well, I was just you just made me think like one thing I've been frustrated about so I'm writing a brass quintet right now, and one of the issues
same.
I've had with it is like um no performer doesn't um like clarify the time signature and how the notes across a measure are phonated. So like if it's in
Mm.
4, you might like it might be notated that way, but it won't necessarily sound like it's in 4. Or if you've written it in
Yeah.
4 but it's supposed to start sounding like it's in 5, it doesn't start to sound like it's in 5. Are you familiar with the composer Mason Bates?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mason Bates, I've noticed in a couple of his pieces, one of the things when he's like gonna like shift time signatures, he starts doing it like 3 or 4 measures ahead of time. And we were
Mm.
playing this piece a couple of years ago in the band I was in. It's called Mothership. It's like a really, really
Mm.
cool piece for wind
Yeah.
ensemble
Very.
and
Yeah.
electronics. And like he sets up the 6/8 section 4 bars ahead of time, and it on the page it looks like terrible to read in the 4/4 bars, but then when you just connect like, oh, I just have to feel the 6/8 earlier, so when we arrive, like it's facilitated the movement there. It's so easy. No performer never does something like that very well, but like
No.
that's as simple as like 1 + 1 = 2 to the observant performer.
And that's things like with many that I've definitely learned in my early days when I was on like I'm 8. I was on finale in the early days, but like middle school, which I mean maybe we'll get to that origin story of me, but if time allows. But I will say that when I was on music school, like I to get the most accurate, you know, MIDI playback is right because the
Yeah,
sounds are they can only do but so much. Like I actually went ham with my articulations, at least when I was focusing on just
yeah,
MIDI playback. Like when I'm preparing to score, then I do clean up those articulations. Like you would see like marcatos mixed with staccatos, mixed with accents, but you actually do get the kind of separation you actually were looking for. But of
yeah,
course, you would never notate that to an actual musician, so you have to make sure to clean that when you actually make the
yeah.
full score. But now I'm doing less than now thanks to No Performer. But now there are times like maybe I do have to add some accents here, which I think do help. I think
Hmm.
especially if it's very like new music, like the
Yeah,
more you can. I mean, because yeah, there's always I think there's like a common debate, right? Like how much to give to performers. Do you
yeah,
articulate like a lot, or do you not articulate? Especially when it comes to strings. I mean, this applies to everyone,
yeah.
but I see a lot more with string players where like articulations are very very important. And
Well,
like yeah,
oh, sorry. I think you should finish.
okay, like and yeah, articulations are very important. Like, and I agree with that. And I guess that's always a balancing act with each piece, seeing like, okay, I want this kind of vibe, this or this kind of pulse. I think and I would think, okay, probably adding some like small, slight emphases, maybe some tenutos on those beats can help with the pace along, right? But then there are times like, okay, no, actually, I want some little more different interpretations, so I might leave this unmarked. But then I tell okay, no, I need this to be separate. I need this to be separated. I need space here. So I would have to make stuff that you basically expect to see, right?
Yeah.
So then there's the challenge of like, oh, but then there are pieces that are like overly marked, or perhaps they're heavily marked to the point where it
Hmm.
actually seems to like pretty arbitrary at the same time. Oh, it feels like we're being caged in.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm curious your
My
thoughts now.
philosophy with marking my music is my music needs to be notated so efficiently that my musicians can look at it and know how it's supposed to be played.
Exactly.
And I strive for, and this is, so my teacher Steve Taylor really beat this into me, and I mean that endearingly because this was a really profound leveling in my capacity to write music that was playable. Is the fewest mental calculations per measure and per beat in order to play it. Because when it doesn't need to be, there's not so heavy a processing, the instrumentalist can look at it and go like, "Oh, it sounds like that." Bam, easy as you like. And being incredibly detailed and incredibly vague with my indications. So an example I
Mm-hmm.
really like to use for this is like if I'm writing a glockenspiel part,
Yeah.
I might write sparkling
Yep.
because that tells them a lot about how I want it to be played, but I've not told them what sticks they have to use, which is actually really good
Yes.
because not
Yeah.
only
I
does it
haven't
make
told
it
them
more
that.
accessible depending on the level of the group playing it, but I've then, to a more artistically inclined performer, a more independent performer, they can interpret that however they like. And that could mean a variety of things. I have a solo for Glockenspiel and Electronics that I wrote for my
Nice.
friend Elliot Godinez. I mean, this is years ago, a really incredible piece, though. And there were sections where he was using xylophone mallets on it. And I asked him about that. And he's like, makes it ding a little differently. And all of that subtlety is really powerful. He uses like 14/6 over the course of that piece. And
Wow.
it's like 4 minutes. It's crazy. But yeah, I think like being able to notate judiciously is really important. And and,
Absolutely.
and it's and it becomes frustrating sometimes because like sometimes something that I think clarifies exactly what's happening musically really accurately isn't accessible to some performers. I've run into working with some conservatory musicians who, I mean, to their credit, they're immaculate artists, and the expression and the technique they can play their instruments with is really profound. But like, you ask them to read 7/8 and they fall apart. And it's like, oh, come on, cats, what are we doing?
Come on, that's what we do.
like, seriously. Like what? So like
Yeah.
music's not allowed to be in 7/8 groove just because you're gonna fall apart as soon as I ask you to read it? It's crazy, and
Yeah.
to me it's crazy. I understand that, like, especially in chamber music, like that can be really difficult because like trying to establish a pulse as an ensemble is really complex, especially in something like that mixed. It could warrant having a conductor, and that's where I think like a medium like wind ensemble or band is like lays so well into that kind of experimentation because like or brass band too for that matter. It's because like there's the youth of those mediums opens them to the desire to do things that are new in order to make a name for themselves and it becomes it's really powerful to be able to work with musicians on stuff like that because then it like opens up this whole side of their brain that we didn't know was possible where you can have like a 12/8 groove turn into a 10/8 groove like
Yeah.
effortlessly through like one transition and it just like hands off to each other in a really funky way. I wrote a piece like that last year. I'm trying to I need to workshop it a little bit before I'm shipping it out to folks, but like there's sounds like that are infinitely possible, just like really tricky to line up.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. That's so cool. But yeah, you're right about that. It's crazy how that works.
What's
That's
the Oh, sorry.
no.
What's the best piece of advice you've been given as a musician?
I will say. this. So it was my senior year in high school. I was on French horn at the time. I was already accepted to JMU for a composition, and and I was doing was my district district's honor band, and Brian Baumelages was the conductor,
Nice.
and so we played his Pillows in the Shrine. I was first horn for that, which was a heck an epic. And so after the concert, I walked up to him because he is a JMU alum for those that don't know. But I asked him, "Hey, I'm about to start JMU for composition. So I had any advice for me?" And he told me, "Never stop writing and write for your friends," which I think there was actually a bigger meaning to that when it means write for your friends. Whereas like me as a composer, or maybe just as a person who likes to write and create music, right? Because it's it's I think it's an important to, and then this actually goes back to what I talked about earlier when it comes to like for first impressions, where it's like when you're writing stuff, you I would I will make the argument that you like when even when you're in the working stages, when it's like far from being done, like I would argue that it would be very helpful for you to show that to friends that you trust.
Hmm.
From like obviously don't put on the world for the world to see, or else you're gonna get a whole hosh posh of comments that you never expected to get, and you probably
Yeah.
didn't want to expect because you didn't give enough context, and the, and they probably weren't the type for you to share your stuff with them in the first place. But you share stuff with people that know that yes, it's a work in progress. Let's hear how it sounds, and how they react. Because I got that a lot. I had a lot of help during the first 2 years of my undergrad, where I was writing myself. And of course, you were writing for our lessons, right? So it's the grind of that. But
Yeah.
I actually realized the importance. It was like when I met one of my best friends, Adrian B. Sims. Like we met at a film scoring workshop at NYU, but it was during pandemic. It was the first during the first wave, so it ended up being online, which actually made it a little bit more affordable to
Yeah.
attend. And so that's how we met. We were in the orchestral track for the project for the workshop, and it was that whole workshop was heckin' amazing. And and afterwards we stayed. I mean, we all got each other's socials and we stayed in touch. And I realized that Adrian was also a band kid, or very heavily involved with the band medium. I was like, oh, okay, let's meet up, let's talk. Well, not meet up. We talked. We zoomed for like the next year and a half because of the pandemic. But after we started talking to each other and like the amount we realize of how similar wavelengths we think on when it comes to composition and music, it was like I've never had a friend like that before. Like now don't get me wrong, I love the friends I had at JMU, and those friends were crucial for me.
Yeah.
But a different friend like this that understood me a lot more about myself, almost to the point where it was more than I understood myself at the time. That helped me realize and realize make a lot more awareness of what I've been doing and guess what I think I should be doing. So because of how good friends we shared each other's stuff all the time, like and stuff that we've already done, and then stuff that we're now like in progress. And so like and we get like all tons of good feedback and from each other. Either we're looking for compositional or engraving or
Mhm.
or pacing, sectional stuff. I
Yeah.
think it's really useful for composers or again anyone just have a good friend to listen to what you got going on, even when it's not done. That's actually the best time is when
Yeah.
you're working in progress because that means there's plenty of room to take it, plenty of room to grow. Whereas when you finish it,
Yeah.
you get that itch. It's like, oh, it's kind of done. I don't really want to make any huge changes. Well, then that's why you gotta show this to people early on in the process because you get to hear their first reactions versus your ears are already used to everything that's on that page and you're expecting it to the point where it's likely it actually hurts us because we expect it too much. We can't tell. It's harder to
Hmm.
tell if it's actually doing what we want to, which is why I also encourage
Yeah.
composers to take breaks as well. Like
Hmm.
if you're struggling, especially if you're struggling, if you found like a writer's block or you found a section where you just don't know what to do, take a break and listen to stuff. I mean, I
Yeah.
listen to music that's like completely different from that, and actually,
Yeah.
it's that kind of music that's very opposite spectrum of when I'm writing. It actually helps me chisel that wall because
Yeah.
you learn different nuances, different elements. It's like, oh, I like what they did here, and
Yeah.
then I start experimenting in my head, tapping that wall with different tools and angles and
Hmm.
trajectories, and like, oh, I found one I think will work, and then it ends up working out fantastically, and it works with in terms of context of the whole piece. Like it doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not like out of nowhere just place in it. It actually works, and so yeah, that's why I really feel like write for your friends, and not only write for the musicians that are in your locality, because they also make really good friends as
Yeah.
well, but write for your composition peers.
Yeah, I think I think being able to share your music with people to get an idea of like how it's going to work. I think it's one of the most important things we can do. I am inspired often by stand-up comedians because when like a comedian's got to work out their material a lot in the club to see how does because like sometimes a joke's going to be perfect right out the gate, but that's usually not the case. You've got to try it out a couple of times, like
Hmm.
figure out, well, maybe I need to switch it around, and or maybe it just needs to be shorter or whatever. And being able and it's with how many comedians have huge podcasts right now, I think it's a really interesting time to be listening to what they have to say, because especially if it's two comedians talking with each other as opposed to like a comedian just by themselves or with some random other person,
Yeah,
when the comedians sit down together, they always talk about comedy, and I think it's a really interesting time to listen to world class creatives talk about how to be creative.
hmm,
And it's only one degree of separation to say like, oh well, how can I think about music that way?
hmm,
And so, like, does this need to be there? Can I shorten it? Is it as gratifying a gesture as I want it to be? And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes the rifle's not being fired in Act Two, so I need to get rid of it, or I should fire
yeah.
it. And and I think those are all really important things to think about. Something else I was thinking as we were talking about this is just like, shoot, what was I thinking about? Um, I don't remember. I'll think of it later. But well, just this idea of like I don't know, interdisciplinary comedy. Yeah,
Yeah,
just being able to have these oh, we were talking about writing for our friends. Yeah, I think being able to write for your friends that are local, being able to send stuff to other people, say, "Hey, do you think this works?" Being able to like take it to folks who are just performers, who don't do the composition thing. I think getting them to look at it is really important too, because then you get this idea of like, well, was it gratifying to listen to? Because if it's gratifying to listen to, like a performer or even like a non-musician is going to react very differently to a piece than a composer would, because we look for different stuff. Being
yeah,
able to test it against a wider audience, you begin to ask. I have this triangle of questions that I ask about every piece that I write, because to me, I think it's really difficult to argue that a piece is bad music if it's gratifying to listen to, gratifying to perform, and gratifying to write.
absolutely.
Some You don't have to like my music, but it's really hard to argue that it's bad if it does all three of those things. And it might not do all three of those things for everybody.
Hmm.
But if it's gratifying for me to listen to and to write, and it's gratifying for performers that I like and trust to perform, then I'm confident that it's going to work. And I'm
Absolutely.
confident that it's going to be profound music, right? Like we were talking about
Hmm.
earlier. And so, yeah, I think like writing for your friends is super important in that regard. And I think being able to test it is really important too. And as you build those relationships, it then actually becomes even easier for your music to get performed. Because
Exactly.
like when like your friends love your music unconditionally, you're going to be the person that they talk about.
Hmm. Absolutely. Now, I will preface this is that I know with composers, or anyone who's writing music that's starting out, and because
Hmm.
I can understand that there are people that are probably very self conscious and afraid to share
Yeah.
their creations and their thought process with people. I get that. I understand that. I was one of them, but when they, but there'll be a time where you have to take that first step out of the box, come out of the shell,
Yeah.
and show it. But that's the thing: share with people that you trust, that you share
Yeah.
similar like like lengths in music. Maybe it's even good to have someone that shares it differently. But there's something about this person that you connect with, and that makes you feel like, okay, I can trust you to listen to this thing that's like work in progress. Everything's
Hmm.
subject to change, right? Everything's tentative. Like I'm not
Yeah.
really married to anything in my pieces. Like there's always like an energy I try to capture, and so if I need to change some stuff to but and I will be able to. I can still easily figure out different ways to capture that energy if I feel like there's something that really needs to be changed. So that's why I try
Yeah.
not to be so locked in every time.
Yeah.
therapy's like, oh, I'd like it to be performed this way, but if there isn't that like a legitimate reason
Yeah.
that makes sense, that tells me, okay, I might need to rework this. I will do it because again, I care more
Yeah.
about the energy and the conviction that the audience is supposed to get, not
Yeah.
the the intellectual of
Some
it.
Actually, I think there's an intellectual way to think about this
Yeah.
that allows you to like or at least it's allowed me to like let go of some of the emotions. I say that an experimental musician. Well,
Yeah.
I've got to do the experiment. I've got to share the experiment.
There you
Like,
go.
okay,
There you
it
go.
didn't work. A lot of it, like, talk to any scientist. Lots of experiments don't work.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. But when it doesn't work, that actually tells you a lot. It tells you what you shouldn't try. Or maybe you need to try it, but a little bit differently. Or maybe the context was different. Great example of this. That like 12/8 to 10/8 transition I was talking about a little bit ago.
Yeah.
I wrote that in a wind quintet.
Mm.
Not a good place to do that. I don't know that I like the results are still really cool. There is a time and place where that works, but
Yes.
it's not going to be most of the time. Okay. Well, if you want your music to work every time, that's not the place to do it. But like if it's okay that it doesn't work every time and like the chance that it happens is what's powerful about it, well, okay, cool, then go for it. But
Absolutely.
you're never going to know if you don't try, and you're never going to be able to try if you don't show it to some people and get their advice or get it played. And so in that
Exactly.
regard, the mentality I tried to take on is like picks or it didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually a really good analogy. That's actually a really good analogy. If only you could
Yeah.
patent it.
And then like if the experience that you're using to or like the way you're connecting with folks is we put on this performance and like what in the grand scheme of like the universe, like nothing we do really matters,
Mm-hmm.
but that's the human condition. So why not try to make the most profound experience that you can, creating something that arbitrarily has no value for its own sake, for the sake of being able to connect emotionally with other people and to
Yeah.
share the experience of understanding that we're in this one space together and we're going to commit this time and decorate it with the sounds that we can produce that our friend decided on. Like that's it's it's the depths of the human experience.
Exactly. The depths of the human experience. Sounds like a piece for maybe not one person. I think that's the thing that'd be a cool thing to look into. Like group compositions. Like I don't know.
Do
That's
you
I was
do you
very cool.
improvise music at all?
Improvise.
Yeah.
If we're not talking jazz, not necessarily. I just haven't been in enough opportunities like that.
Mhm.
I witnessed some, and I have done a little bit. It was at a festival I did in Wintergreen, Virginia, with the Wintergreen Festival.
Mhm.
I was one of the composition students there. It was like the summer before I moved to UT Austin, and I brought my instrument just in the off chance because I mean it didn't say
Yeah.
it was required because I mean I wasn't there as a performer, but I'd probably just I had to
Yeah.
practice a little bit, and so I was like one of our final projects that we do, and what we did, and we all get put into different groups with one of the faculty is our like designated to do these these like sort of like final project projects, right? But what our group ended up
Yeah.
doing was completely like it was all arbitrary. It was all like not necessarily esoteric in a bad way, but just like oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the exact definition. But what we pretty ended up doing was everyone was like invited onto like the stage, and we all just improv.
Yeah.
We had these different stations of like
Mhm.
music that had like
Yeah.
guided gestures, but you could practically do whatever you wanted. And so I actually participated in that a little bit, and that was actually kind of interesting, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And so I guess that's like
I don't think
yeah.
I don't think anything has been as helpful for my composition as joining the improvisers exchange. So that's
Mm,
an ensemble here at Illinois where
yeah.
every Friday for 2 hours, all we do is we have a jam of improvised group composition. And
Interesting.
it's so cool. The professor that runs it is the director of global arts at the Performing Arts Center here. His name's Jason Finkelman, and he studied with a composer named Pauline Oliveros. Is she somebody you've heard of?
Paulina Oliveros. I think the name rings a bell. But
Yeah, she and Terry Riley and Steve Reich and a few other friends
okay.
started the San Francisco Tape Music Center. She's somebody to look up. She's a very esoteric musician. She has these scores that are just like instructions written out as prose on a page. They're really
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. But so Jason was one of her students for a while, and so literally what we do is we roll up and sometimes we have structured improvisations that we do, sometimes we do conducted improvisation, so someone will stand and like cue people when to come in, and they'll have gestures that they've
Mm.
decided where they'll say like, okay, this is the tempo I'm going to cue you, so I'll cue you with tempo and then point when I want you to come in. I'll take you out, I'll bring you in, I'll like make a gesture with my arms that are like the gesture I want you to play.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll invite somebody in for a solo, and we have a gesture for that. Um, Other times he'll just say like, "Okay, I'm gonna click go on the recorder, and we're just gonna play, and whatever happens, happens." And basically, like the way this is like come to an academic class is like we have a few like reflection papers, one for the midterm, one for the final that we have to do. But what the idea is like we go back, we listen to everything that we performed,
Mm-hmm.
over the course of the semester. We usually do a couple sound installations at the local art museum. There's a bar we usually gig the first Friday of the month or the first Monday of the month. um,
Nice.
but it's nuts, and I mean people. It's open to musicians of all varieties. So like my friend Nikolai, I mean, he's a very gifted musician in like a Western sense, but like he plays a lot of world music. Like he has a fuyara, which is like a bass overtone flute from Slovakia.
Ooh.
My friend Dimitri is an oud specialist. So he brings that. Jason, our teacher, is an Afro-Brazilian percussionist, and his primary instrument is berimbau. So like between all of that, not to mention like we have an oboist. I play euphonium. My friend Jessica and my friend Joe both play French horn. We have percussionists. We have pianists. We have electronic musicians, all kinds. And so it really becomes this like wild experiment, and it's new every week. And in reviewing the music that we make, trying to track the arc of the piece and figure out like, well, what are the roles that we're taking on and why, and how did this experiment happen? It's like some, yeah, a lot of the times it doesn't amount to anything that's like mind breaking, but sometimes it's the best music I've ever heard, and I didn't even know it was possible. And then the question becomes like, how do I do that in my concert music? Try to capture that essence and like that randomness,
Mm-hmm.
but also like do it in a way that's been fit to order. I think it's really important. I think that more composers should try to participate in a group like that or start a group like that, because it doesn't cost anything. Like if you can find
Mm-hmm.
space and people can roll up, and even if you just have like a bunch of desks, you could drum something.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So no, there is actually new improvise. At least someone that's trying to start an improvisory group here, with one of our new students who's actually from Brazil, and one of our electronic music students, because we our comp studio is kind of like in two parts. There's the acoustic, morely wind,
Yeah.
or acoustic heavy side. Then there's the electronic music studio that's directed by our Professor Janwibe Tejera, who's also from Brazil, and he's nuts, dude. He's crazy good with electronics, but man, it's wild. So he has his own. Yeah, he has his own like separated composition studio. So um, I, I'll definitely have to hit that up. Hopefully I can try and do this fall, because like I'm just doing too much this spring. Like I already
Yeah.
learned my lesson last year with like doubling up on stuff. Like I performed way too much last spring. Like it was as like I pretty much had the load of a performance major, yet I was still doing comp stuff. It was
Yeah.
like I was playing horn for this octet wind octet that, and then I was playing a trombone quartet on bass trombone for the brass
Dang.
class, and then I was of course playing tenor bone for the Austin Brass Band I go to every Mondays. And so well, almost trying to do ensembles, so it was like, nah, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I don't know how I survived that. I mean, it was fun. I didn't have trouble learning the music, but it's just a lot of rehearsal time
Yeah.
that's taken out of my ability to, well, do what I came here for. That I realized really
Yeah.
quickly. I was okay. I gotta take a step back, which is why I'm now only performing with like the UT trombone choir and the Austin brass band this semester. And well, it's even lighter, but I find that balance
Yeah.
right because I love
Yeah,
performing.
it's tricky. I have a hard time with that too, because like I play principal euphonium in the Wind Symphony here, which is our top
Yeah.
band. I play with the Improvisers Exchange. I'm first euphonium in the Illini Tuba Quartet. I play
Ooh,
with the tuba and euphonium ensemble. Like it's a lot of playing, man.
that's a lot of playing. That
Yeah,
sucks.
honestly, I'm like, it's good for me though because like when I don't have a lot of time to practice, I have to get so good at being able to read the music on the page.
Oh yeah.
And so like that's it's all been really helpful. And then like it's been nice to be able to stagger out some of my my solo recitals and stuff because I still want to be active doing stuff like that. But like doing music that's more challenging musically than technically has kind of been the hack around that because like
Mm-hmm.
I mean I've kind of gotten away with this idea of like I need to flex on people with like the technical side of my playing on every recital. Like and the way I've gotten around that is like if I have one piece that's just like, oh yeah, don't forget that I have technique to burn and it's like 2 minutes, then like it it leaves people with enough taste of like, oh yeah, like Andrew's got lots of technique, but he wants to show all of this musical stuff and all of these interesting gestures and like how like music of different places can come up. So like last semester I did a recital of almost all Pauline Oliveros charts, which was really easy to present because like
Mm-hmm.
there all of her scores are just prose written on a page where she'll say like there's one of the pieces I played was it's called the river meditation and the instructions say sit beside a river, listen with your eyes closed until your breath and the rhythm of the river synchronize, then begin to play the rhythms and the tune of the river that you hear. That's all
Wow.
it says. And so,
Wow.
like, bringing that into that's actually a really interesting idea for the idea of a concert hall because, okay, I made an arbitrary decision that I think the piece should be 8 minutes. So I take a snippet of just an ambient river sound that I recorded, and then I fade it in and fade it out, and then you just do the piece in the concert hall, and it's really easy to prepare. but
Exactly.
that's but that's nothing like anybody in brass is doing right now. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
really cool idea and really
No,
different. And you don't
absolutely.
and like that's something I was able to put on that concert without like an insane amount of preparation, which is like really nice for my time. The thing I was thinking about that I wanted to go back to earlier was we were talking about like taking breaks when you get writer's block. One thing
Mm-hmm.
I found, I need to ask this question first. When you sit
Okay.
down to write, do
Yeah.
you like schedule out your writing time or do you just
Oh,
sit down and try to write as much as you can?
it's kind of a mix of both. Like, like obviously, well, I'm in school with like weekly lessons that I need to make sure I get a good amount
Hmm.
to talk about because I'm a professor, and of course I don't want to disappoint myself because because I mean I'm very fortunate to have works that do have deadlines
Yeah.
like these current works I'm working on, which actually you actually helped me think about a little more today because one of them is the euphonium and piano piece that I'm writing for a professor's recital. I might mention to you, John Caputo. He actually directs the Austin Brass Band here, and he also teaches low brass down at University of Texas in San Antonio. And he's great guy, great player, and so. And I know I wanted that piece, and we've talked about it. We know what we want to do with it, but I'm like, as I'm currently trying to get progress done because it's kind of like due at the end of the semester. Like I don't, I'm trying not to let it turn technical for the sake of it being technical. I'm really trying to get focus on like the actual musical experience of it. But also, I have ideas like I would like this piece to be accepted as like as a hopefully maybe in like 10 15 years as a formidable jury piece for
Yeah.
those who are studying euphonium. But I realize, when it comes to that, I can't think of it like a jury piece. I really do. I just have to write the music,
Yeah.
and so you actually talked about that a little bit just like a minute ago. That helped me a lot. That actually helped me realize, yeah, I'm really trying to not be technical for the sake of it being on a recital, where I
Mm.
just really like I just need to focus on just music. Now
Yeah.
back to your question, because of that.
Yeah.
There are times where like, okay, I actually do have to write during this time period of the day. Like I don't schedule it. Like there are parts of me where like I hate scheduling things. Or I hate a strong word, but it's like
Yeah. No, I know what you mean,
dislike.
man.
I dislike. There are some things that I do like to schedule, and there are some things that I definitely do not like to schedule. I'm just like to just let it happen when I'm in the mood for it, because
Mm,
it's and so when it comes to writing, like if I know I'm not making, if I'm struggling to make progress, then I will tell myself, okay, you need to get this done. You know you need time, especially when it comes to engraving. When it's the larger ensemble pieces, you need to say at least like a month to just to engrave large
yeah.
ensemble stuff. And so I need to make sure the pieces like compositionally as done as it can be before then.
Yeah.
So so there are times like maybe perhaps today, I think probably today after this podcast, like I gotta go make some progress in that piece for my lesson. Thankfully it's on Wednesday, but
Yeah.
teaching is in the way. So it's like I don't normally schedule out my times to write because I'm always writing in my
Yeah.
head. Like I'm always thinking about the pieces I'm currently writing in my head, and it's just I know I like, oh, I need to make progress. Let's see, where am I at right now?
Yeah.
Where and I'm actually like I'm chiseling the walls in my head as I'm
Yeah.
out in my day, or I'm out in the shower, or just about to fall asleep, or enter the REM cycle. And of course, it's those times in the shower and the REM cycle where I get big progress in my head. It's like, oh, I
Yeah.
like this. This is actually think where it should go. And so I have to quickly bring out my laptop and remember it and
Yeah.
get down as much as I could, especially when it's like, especially when I'm about to fall
Yeah.
asleep, man. It's like I get those just there, and I'm like, and I got to
Yeah.
get up, turn on the screen, and
Yeah. I
oh, blank.
I have that same thing, and what I found is that well, I used to write sticky notes to myself, and then there was a
Mm.
night where I put six on top of my computer at once, and I was like, I'm gonna get a notebook. I'm gonna get a notebook. But like, I think being able to have a place to put those ideas where
Yeah.
you can revisit them before you commit them to paper without having to get that harsh computer lighting into your eyes before
Yeah.
bed. Because I mean, when that active brain is preoccupied, I'm confident that's where a lot of my clairvoyance happens too. I think that's really powerful. I found that was really
Exactly.
helpful for me. One thing I decided to do was I tried to start writing first thing in the morning every day. And
Mm-hmm.
my rule is, especially on a day where like I feel a lot of resistance to writing, I tell myself like, do an hour. And if at the end of
Yeah.
an hour it feels terrible and you feel like the music's terrible, okay, that's fine. Come back tomorrow. But sometimes it's just I needed to get the groove going. And when it gets going and it gets really good, then great. And I tried to set a limit of like 2.5 hours depending on the day. And if that's all the writing I do that day, then I consider it a great success. Or on like if I only have time to do an hour, great. I made forward
Yeah.
progress. And
Yeah.
I found that through consistency, I don't always have a day where I write for forever, but on occasion, I'll have a day where like maybe I'm up at 6:30, I make coffee and I do the dishes and clean my kitchen and I sit down to write having like because I have this weird idea that like if I put things in order, that gears my brain to like putting other things in order. And so
Mm-hmm.
getting to sitting down to write, then it's not the first time I put stuff in order and cleaned things that day. So like my brain is oriented towards like, okay, let's clean this and make this idea happen and make it polished.
Mm-hmm.
And so like when I've done that, and so like I sit down, I've got my coffee and I start to write, like at that point it might be like 6:45, 7 o'clock. I've had days in the past where like I've blinked and suddenly it's 1:30 p.m. and like I've written more than I ever thought I would and it's polished and it's good and I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
that felt easy. But I feel like those are times, and it's really exhilarating when that happens, but I feel like those are fewer and farther between, but that in doing the work every day, you kind of like earn
Mm-hmm.
the karma to be able to get a day like that where suddenly everything falls into place and the piece feels
Yes.
effortless and you know how you want it
Yes.
to go and you don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. Like that. Well, with Through the Bay, that happened. The piece had to be that piece had to be delivered by August, like beginning of August.
Mhm.
As per agreement with the consortium parties, and so and that piece was like barely halfway done. Like I was struggling to get it through and to get work stuff done over the summer, and so I realized, okay, Joe, you gotta like there's gonna come a time where you're just gonna have to you're not gonna be able to sleep, but until this piece gets done, and then
Yeah.
that happened. So that happened was thankfully I had the opportunity to house sit for a couple of professors throughout the whole month of July. So like the first half I was house sitting at someone else's place. I was like, and far west Austin where everything's like dead quiet, and of
Mm.
course that's where the big houses are. But that's about I house sat, and I needed that change of scenery. Like there's times like,
Yeah.
yeah, I need to be in a different place to write, and that helped me finish the darn piece. I mean, it was a long crummy day, but I got it done, and
Yeah.
then the next house sitting, I was able to get the engraving done, and that same scenery
Hmm.
change. And so I definitely have times where it's like, oh, or like, okay, I need to. But I sometimes find that my best, like when I was in undergrad, my best times to write were those mornings, like first thing in the morning
Oh yeah.
was was like it was like those were great for me. And then it would happen as the day goes by because I'll already be at my desk, so I'm already in like that work mode. And while I'm
Hmm.
watching a YouTube video, I'm if I stare at my score long enough, something will start forming. If I stare at the empty page, like,
Yeah.
oh, something will start. Like, all right, we'll try this out, see what happens.
Yeah.
And so, but nowadays, it's like it's I don't know, I find it hard to do that in the morning, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because of just academia. I'm ready to be done with academia, or like be done with school, and actually
Hmm.
try and be a full time, or at least see what's like to try and be a full time composer. Even though, you know,
Yeah.
many ways I'm nowhere near, but I definitely have the workload of a full time composer.
Yeah. No kidding.
It's like it's but so I'm very interested to see how that perhaps my thing, because I'm sure my whole stats will likely change, because I'm hopefully to get like when I eventually move to like hopefully a better, more comfortable place, where I can
Yeah.
actually have an office that say, okay, here I can actually just think about my pieces, whereas I
Yeah.
I do that and sleep in the because I like writing in my bed, like
Hmm.
it's very comfy. I mean, I have a comfy chair, office chair, but it's
Yeah.
like, or sorry, technically a gamer chair, but
Hmm.
I don't know. I get more. I don't know, it's just I guess I just like the openness, and
Yeah.
I can just I'm pretty much my whole bed's like pretty much its own desk in a way.
Yeah.
And there are times where nowadays I write better when it's the evenings, but the problem is I have stuff to do in the morning, whether it's
Yeah.
teaching at the bright hour of 8:30 or something else that's like
Yeah.
I kind of have to get sleep. So I
Yeah.
don't know. It's
I know
balance.
what you mean. I think the like having a scenery and having like a setting where like that's like the writing space and you don't
Mm-hmm.
use it for much else or very little else, I think makes a
Yeah.
huge difference. So like a couple years ago, the apartment I was living at was like really far off campus. And so
Mm-hmm.
like wasn't super expensive or like it wasn't as expensive for like how big an apartment it was. And I
Yeah.
just like paid the price and like taking 20 minutes to get to campus every day. But
Mm-hmm.
it was really cool because it had a dining room and it was a corner apartment. So like
Mm.
this dining room had a lot of natural light in the morning. And
Nice.
so I would make my coffee and I would sit at my dining room table and I would write. And I could easily do 3 hours, 4 hours every day. It was crazy. I wrote an
Wow.
insane I wrote all of interior basically at that dining room table because it sat down and it felt easy and it was like, oh, I can clean this and this is my writing space. And it was really funny. Like after a little while, I stopped eating at the dining room. I would go eat in the living room because it's like, nah,
Wow.
man, this is the
Yeah,
writing
yeah, yeah.
space. I can't eat in here.
No,
I'll get it dirty.
no, oh Lord, no, don't do that, bro. Don't do that. It's the last thing you want.
It was silly.
But no, I had a similar experience. So when I went to Seattle for the first time, I was staying in one of the bassist homes, and it was a very nice home. They actually had a really nice piano. Of course, and I was in the process of writing, my brass band, set piece. It was it was like a big tone poem, 17 minutes,
Yeah,
that turned out to be like my master's thesis. I mean, after enough convincing, I made it to be my master's thesis.
that's
And
awesome.
because the whole faculty didn't even know. I mean, other than Omar, they didn't know what a British brass band was. And so
That's
like
crazy.
and so I go through the motions with them, and they're like, "Wow, I never heard of this group before." And I convinced them that, yeah, this is a group worth writing for, and it's more groups in the U.S. So it's getting
Yeah,
there's a potential market building, so it's not going to be like a piece that's going to be like one and done and never picked up again. So back to the thing, so like, I was able to use that piano like a lot since I was relaxing. I was finally done with undergrad, so it was like finally like a day to just be myself and do
Yeah.
whatever happens in the moment of time. And I had manuscript paper because I wanted to plan that piece on a manuscript, get the ideas. I like using the paper to plan out like just the smallest of ideas,
Yeah, me
or
too.
or even the smallest goals I'm currently conjuring for what I envision for the piece, either what I
Yeah.
want to get out of it or what the musicians I want the musicians to get out of it, or someone said someone's getting something, and so I was able to actually like get a lot of the themes and motifs down from just being at the piano. Now, granted, I need to get a piano, or at least a keyboard to dabble on a lot because like I guess I'm just lazy. I don't like going to campus on like a day off to just go for the piano. I don't know, maybe that's an arguable statement, but I do think a lot in my head. Which granted, I also have the curse that is perfect
Mhm.
pitch, so it helps me a lot as well. But there are times where I need to hear the ideas out of my head, and
Yeah.
I've had enough experiences where it's like okay, it's worth actually playing it or just hearing it out, and then actually being able to improvise, right? Like
Yeah.
because I would improvise with my melodies or motifs or any other like, ideas. Like, oh, what if I did these two chords together, create this bitonal, sound world, or what if I change the different keys or the spacing, the chord spacing as well. I care a
Yeah.
lot about the actual frequencies between the different chord tones, right, and how much distance is actually happening there,
Mhm.
and and so I don't know, it's a very fast thing, but yeah, it's cool when how much the change of scenery just helps. So yeah, I was able to like get a lot done from that session, but probably would not have in my dingy dorm room at the time.
Yeah, for sure. One thing I found was really helpful for when I need to be composing and I'm on the go. I got a piano app for
Mm-hmm.
my phone.
Nice.
So like, I mean, like, there's a couple, they're free, and like you can
Mm-hmm.
usually play like up to 6 notes at a time. So I mean, it's not as perfect as being able to work on
Yeah,
something like a
yeah.
piano, but like, I mean, I used um I used that app all the time. I think I wrote all of the melodies or the melody and like all of the harmonizations to Interior sitting at a cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, cuz I just happened to be there and I was like, I really need to write. I've got an hour and a half. Like, let's punch out some time, and just trying to like sketch it out, and like, okay, well, if I was going to make this modal, what would it be like, and what did it sound like, and what would I need to like, what tiny changes would I need to make so that it's still the theme but like with slight
Hmm.
alterations. And it was great for something like that.
Interesting. No, absolutely. No, I'm looking at the score. I'm seeing like, right, six. You only have 6 notes of a piano.
Yeah.
Like imagine like how that forms. So, hey, that's
Oh,
actually
that part, I
fascinating.
literally just sang it. I heard it in my head and was like, yeah, that's what it needs to be.
Oh
Like,
no, yeah, got
it's
all those
funny every once in a
moments.
while I'll have a moment like that. I tried to notate on like staff paper everything that my piece is going to be built from. I can like, my rule is I can transpose it once it's been in the computer, but like I try not to put in any motives that I haven't manifested into like raw space and
Of
raw,
course.
just hearing it with like an instrument or a voice or like a drum or something that I'm drumming on, and just the air. Because unless
Absolutely.
I've grappled with like how I make sense of it, I don't think it's ethical for me to ask somebody else to do it.
That's a strong point.
Well,
Strong
like,
point.
it's like, I'm the composer, right? So like I can't like put some random crap on a page and then be like, "Okay, figure out what I was trying to say." That's what? That
Mm-hmm.
would be crazy.
Yeah. Nah, I've been told plenty of times, like if you can sing it, they can play it.
Yeah.
And it's not like I limit myself. But it's like I use that as a way of like because I
Hmm.
mean I've been fortunate. Maybe this will be the segue into like a little bit of orange strokes. I mean I don't know how much time we have on this, and
As long as you want.
I don't have anything else. So okay, all right, bet let's do it. I got it now. So I guess we can talk about the. All right, well,
Yeah,
if we
let's talk
have
about it, man.
the origin story. So as to how I feel like if you can sing it, you can play it. But so I first got the composition bug. Well, not really composition bug, but like I was the first music bug was like seventh grade. So I was on alto saxophone starting in sixth grade. That's when
You've
band
played a
started
lot
in
of
my.
stuff, man.
I know, dude. Just wait. I
That's
even.
awesome. I love it.
I
I
know
think it's
it
cool.
is cool. I know it is actually you'll learn. Well, you probably already know, but I will say later like how actually useful that turned out to be. So I started out on good old alto saxophone because it was the only sound I could make a note out of at the the instrument tryouts that my school was having. And so, and of course, me and 10 other people were also on alto sax. But Sound Great came by. There was this particular piece that I really liked, and it was Randall Sandwich's Adrenaline Engines,
Hmm.
and I liked it just enough that it prompted me to then go home and research it on its own. Like that's the first
Nice.
time I ever looked up a band piece ever, like or do any sort of research on my own. And then I found out and I learned about publishing companies. So, particular JW Pepper was the first one that came up, and I was able to hear the studio recording of so like the guided interpretation. Oh, that's what we're supposed to sound like.
Hmm.
Interesting. And then there was a score. The full score is available on there. So I actually ended up learning how to read the score through that as well, or figuring out how it worked. But then end of the spring, we got introduced to notation software. And this was finale 2010. Woo. And I was like, wait, this is a cool thing. This is cool. You
Yeah,
can
man.
type in notes, it'll play it back to you. Like this is insane. And so we were put into groups, and we kind of either made arrangements of pop songs or try to create our own. And I actually ended up doing like a little bit of Sandwich's Afterburn, which is part of that trilogy with Afterburn, General Engines, and Steel. So because I was already like listening to a lot of his stuff, I was a huge fan of his works because I loved his energy. And
Yes.
and that was the time where I only had respect for I only liked fast pieces at the time. I didn't get enough respect for lyrical slow pieces yet until like maybe
Yeah.
like a couple years later, but otherwise that was my introduction to notation software, and I was completely riddled by that. I begged my father to get me one, to get me a copy, and so he did, and so I was there like on our little house computer, and I was messing around with stuff, and and small things is like, oh, alto trombone, what is that? And you see the alto clef. I'm like, what the heck is that? I'm like,
Yeah.
what kind of clef is that? What? That's weird. But anyway, moving on. So fast forwarding a little bit. So what I ended up doing to practice that software is like I would take scores I found on JW Pepper, and I would actually type them in note for note in Finale.
Dang.
I would
That's
type them in.
awesome.
I would type them in because
That's next level, man.
if I like the piece, if there was a full score and recording available, I would type in the finale. And so by doing that, I learned a lot of nuances. I learned a lot of patterns. I learned a lot about melody, counter melodies,
Yeah.
articulations,
That's
and
awesome.
to make it exactly look like that. And so I wasn't never did anything with them. It was purely for just my educational use, right? And for my fascinations. I mean, it started out very small with only like instruments that I liked from. General Engines was the first piece I did, but I was only doing like two or three of the instruments, and then I eventually brought in everything else. And what the cool thing you can do, right, with notation software is that you can transpose things. So I was
Hmm.
listening to the piece in different keys, and
Whoa.
and
That's awesome.
or even putting them in ranges that are definitely not playable, like seeing timpani like five lines above staff.
Yeah.
It's actually really funny hearing
Oh yeah,
steel that
dude.
way, just hearing everyone being like it's just sitting here in the computer just generate like this is how it would
Yeah.
sound like if it was that was I laugh. I remember I have memories of laughing so hard at that at my house. But anyway, so I continued doing that with other band pieces, and I think I eventually started doing lyrical stuff. So a fun project I did for my mother, it was eighth grade, and it was Christmas season, and so I found a concert version of the Polar Express on Alfred. Yeah, I think it was Alfred back then. And then I was like, this is amazing because Polar Express was one of my favorite films. I mean, I'm a train kid. I love
Yeah.
trains growing up. Thomas Tank Engine. I was up every day at 6 a.m.
Yeah, me too, man.
As a child. What right after Barney? I was like, it was always right after Barney and Friends. Oh man, gosh, this movie. And to watch Thomas Tank Engine, and so, golly, all right, and so I convinced my mother to buy the score to that since the score was like it's heavy. I mean, it still is heavily not scanned grade, and it's only the first page. Like you can barely make out anything on of the first page, but the full recording's up there, and it's freaking amazing. I'm pretty sure it's like the overture suite that you hear in the
Yeah.
credits because it's actually in this Spotify album, so it's a legit thing. So
That's
I,
awesome.
I was like the first score I was able to hold as well, and it was of course it was a full orchestral score. And the
Yeah.
first measure and the violins was like seventh, eighth position G D, in the key of G major. Then it was like all the way up there at the end of the fingerboard. It was like seventh legend line D. I'm like, what note is that? It's like saxophone player. You don't see the note.
Yeah.
You don't see it that high. And but so I made that as a project to myself for my mother. So I typed that whole score in. That was, and I would listen to it all. I would listen to it like on repeat, that whole thing,
Wow.
and and I was typing the score again, learning orchestration, like basically like like terminology was not there,
Yeah.
not at all. But I was fine. I was seeing the patterns. I was seeing the conventions and the traditions, the doublings, and even
Hmm.
solos and ranges, because that also helped me a lot. Was understanding the ranges of the instrument. I think writing band music, but also growing up from a band background also helps a lot too, because like
Yeah.
I remember having a there was like there's a Hell, either Howler or Alfred, but there was like where you would, if you would buy a score from them, on the back they would have ranges for the different grade levels, and
Hmm.
that's how I pretty much like how I got to understand like, oh, so these are the ranges that they can do, and after seeing the scores, it's like, oh, so trumpets can, let's say for a grade two, trumpets can only go up to like F, in the staff, but like but they get that one time a piece G. Like you only just see in front and say, oh, but like if you ever use this G,
Hmm.
it has to be like once, because brass endurance is different than
Yeah.
woodwinds. And so I was learning. I'm saying like, oh, there's actually like a bit of a threshold here. It's not
Yeah.
just like it's not just fingerings, but it's also airspeed, pressure, and of course mental,
Yes.
psychological capacity, right? That perhaps confuses a lot of people that are not brass composers, or that are not used to writing for brass.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating. So I continue that. Of course, that turned out to be a lot of fun, and I was really proud of myself. And so I continued doing that in high school, doing more arrangements. I got joined the marching band, and so all I was getting the bug of marching band music as well. And I was like, it was end of sophomore year, and I asked myself, well, I've done enough of these, like, literal transcriptions, because it's kind of like reverse engineering if you think about it.
Hmm.
You're when typing everything out, having to get put in every little thing, but it's like,
Yeah.
what is that? Oh, that's a slur. Okay, that's what this does. Like, oh, what's this? Oh, that's a down bow. Okay, and so I asked, well, what if I tried to write my own piece?
Yeah.
And then I wrote my very first composition, which was the band piece. It was called Fanfare and Celebration, because I love fanfares. I love celebratory stuff. I love fast music.
Yeah.
I don't know why. It just did. The flourishes were just so good for me. And so I guess you could probably say those are great for. I mean, it ends in E major, so take that how you will. But it starts in B flat, but it ends in E. But so then I wrote two other band pieces after that, because I was like, oh wow, I can do this. And then learned about composition majoring at JMU. It's like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
major. It's like, oh, that's kind of what I've already been doing. So it
Mm.
kind of makes sense, because like at that time I could not see myself as a band director. Like I love
Yeah.
bands, I love doing it, but like I'm the most shyest introverts imaginable. Like I could public speaking was awful, and like I would stumble so many, which I'm sure I'm doing a fair amount on this podcast, because I do
I
speak.
never would have guessed you were introverted based
I
on how
know.
you've been.
I Well, nowadays, since the pandemic, I'm an introvert with extroverted qualities. Where like
Amen.
I can do stuff. I'm comfortable now. But like I have a battery, and it drains a lot
Yeah.
quicker than some
I think everybody's
people's.
got a battery.
Exactly, we have a battery, but my drains like just quicker, or just at faster levels. But
Hmm.
um, oh man, so yeah, I could not see myself, standing in front of a classroom of students and teaching them music. I could not see that then.
Hmm.
Nowadays, I have a little more confidence, since I know more. Like
Hmm.
I'm able to connect a lot more dots and lines with stuff. But so I did that, and did a lot more marching band arrangements. I actually did like an arrangement of Africa that actually got pretty much
Nice.
performed. I know that was fun. Um, and then yeah, I got to the JMU early, even though my scores were absolutely horrific, because it was all music score at the time, and I didn't know how to condense percussion. So every percussion line had its own thing, and it was all in landscape mode, and
Yeah.
all printed on 8.5 by 11. So all like half the stabs were cut out because it was never scaled properly. Like, it was
Yeah.
like I don't know how I got in, but I had good MIDI though, because I learned like
Yeah.
how important gained interpretation across. So there were a lot of like,
Yeah.
like I said, unnecessary markings and hidden dynamics. I was like, oh, this may be marked forte in actual score, but in the MIDI it's marked fortissimo, or maybe or slightly less to get more
Yeah.
dramatic effect. Which I'm
I think
still trying to. I think I'm figuring out a better relationship nowadays. But what are you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I think that actually points to something really profound about accessibility for young composers because um, they might not know a lot of the engraving conventions that are really common for people who have studied at a university, but like if their MIDI is so detailed that it's not matching the score, I think that says a lot about their attention to detail and about them knowing what they want. I think that has a lot of value, and that I think that faculty would be fools to ignore it, especially
I
for
can see
like,
that.
because some of it is just the accessibility. I mean, like when I applied to composition as a major, so where I did my bachelor's at Illinois State, and
Yeah.
they at the time when I was there, they didn't let first year freshmen apply to composition. You had to take intro to composition first, but that was like an open enrollment class. um, and then at the end of the semester, you could submit things that you had written, and some of it had been read by live people, but obviously they weren't all the time, before they accepted you into the major. And I think being that detailed with a lot of stuff, I think it sets portfolios apart. I think it
I
makes
think
a
it
big
does.
difference.
Absolutely. No, great point you brought up, Andrew. So where was I? So yeah, so because that's, I mean, did plenty of like stuff from Rhino's little bit of band pieces to even like messing around with march band arrangements. Like
Mm.
somehow we're able to find my old musical profile. I mean, it's still up there, but you can find like my old like marching band like arrangements. Like not like it was never performed. Like I never intended to for performance of those, but they're just
Mm.
for my own fascination. Excuse me. Excuse me. But so I actually made like a video game marching band show where I think the
Heck
opener
yeah.
was like the opener was the opening theme to Sonic Unleashed, and I made a drum break out of that. It was really awesome. The second movement was well, the ballad was like the theme from Final Fantasy, the first one,
Oh,
and
nice.
it's with a huge like marimba like climbing up at the like that was in there. That turned out pretty well, at least from back then. And then the closer was going to be it was like another like Sonic boss battle. It was like the from Sonic Colors. It's like the phase two of that. But either way, I also made another one of Super Mario Galaxy 2, the opening theme of that. And because so there's some ways that you can find scores, but some other stuff I had to do by ear. And I had to figure it out by ear, which I guess then slowly into me developing or realizing I had perfect pitch.
Whoa.
Because like I mean, as a kid, I've been had a fascination for music. From my father tells me like my father a lot of my music, well, it comes from both my parents because they're both like they weren't necessarily musicians. My mother was a clarinetist in high school, but hated it, so that didn't last long. And then my father, I think, played a little bit of guitar, but that didn't go anywhere either. But and they both went to technical school, and so but they have tons of tracks of stuff from the 70s, 80s, 90s,
That's
of
awesome.
from disco to smooth jazz to R&B to soul. Smooth
That's
jazz
sick.
heavily was what I
That's
listened to
awesome.
a lot in the car. Where my mother then brought in the classical stuff, so we had CDs of Beethoven and Mozart, especially those two. God, I have memories of the Egmont Overture, which again I wasn't paying attention to titles, but I knew how it sounded. It sounded like pirates a little bit.
Yeah.
Man, I listened to that again like later in the last 6 months. I listened to that again. I was like, oh, this is legit memories. Listen to that,
Yeah.
and of course the Einkleid Knock music. I love listening to that as a
Yeah.
child. Of course, it was also those old children's shows like Little Einsteins, like those VHS series. Man,
Yeah.
but anyway, so that's so I guess I've already had a musical background, but now it's time to during band is starting to take form, starting to starting to develop a voice and direction with
Yeah.
how I listen and can repeat back music. Because so like I actually had really good sighting skills in middle school band, which kind of saved me nowadays from like where I'm just showing up to stuff. Well, not like that, but like stuff like or like when I'm performing a lot and like I don't have a lot of time to practice. Not that
Hmm.
I practice a lot either, but being able to sight read, like I'm able to really get through those pieces a lot better and do
Yeah.
more and stuff. But now this comes back to the whole point I talked about like how like seeing those where I saw a lot of early band pieces, like a lot of different from ranging from point 0.5 all the way up to the sixes, and and from all different publishing company sites, and I
Yeah.
was seeing the differences from rhythmic accessibility to range to harmonic to storytelling to like
Yeah.
it was like all that was I think was very crucial to me to really understand the instruments I was writing for And of
Yeah.
course, that then turned to me wanting to play different instruments. So after hearing Adrenaline Engines and researching and found YouTube video performances of them, so I was actually
Mhm.
hearing different. So then I was listening to different interpretations of the same piece, and
Yeah.
there was a specific video that inspired me to switch to trombone, and I begged my teacher to do it because I mean we didn't have one, so I was able to do it in eighth grade, switched to it in eighth grade, and I self-taught myself trombone. I had a little bit of lessons,
Wow.
but I don't think the bug was strong enough for me to continue the lessons. But so I ended up self-teaching myself, and, and so but at the same time, because yeah, I think eighth grade was really the pivotal moment for a lot of things. Where at the same time, I also got a violin, like because I was then delving into like string orchestra stuff and then full orchestra things. It's like, oh, I don't know how to play violin, and so I got a cheap violin, and then actually ended up doing a youth orchestra for like a little bit. Like it was a small, very chill youth orchestra. It was chill, it was familial, and did that for like a year. But then realized my hands were better fit for the cello, from what my teacher said. So we actually
Mhm.
switched to we actually switched to cello for the next 4 or 5 years, all throughout till I graduated high school. So I was doing cello on the side, where now I started listening to the film scores. So there's, you know, Back to the Future, Pirates of the Caribbean, as well as listening to soundtracks by themselves, which then spawned my, oh, I love the storytelling aspect. I love the emotion. I love, like, it feels like it's doing stuff. I'm feeling something.
Yeah.
Like I want to do film scoring. That was the bug for that. And so like I then switched to horn. I mean, other than a quote being said to me that like, oh, it's like the second hardest orchestral instrument to master. And I was like, challenge accepted. And so I self-taught myself horn. I never had
Nice.
lessons. I almost
Whoa.
did, but I never. But don't worry, I was still not great. Like my musicianship was strong, I think, because of all the stuff I was
Clearly.
doing. From my musicianship, I had a really good sense of musical lines, but the technique was the biggest issue. Especially as
Yeah.
I had braces too. Like the last 2 years of high school,
Technique's the toughest, I think, because
it
like the,
is.
I mean, like acquiring technique is really like you have to go to the gym basically.
It's like
And
going to the
so like
gym.
so if you're going to get elite as far as technique, you really have to devote your life to it. It's difficult for sure.
Exactly. So
But I
it got,
think
yeah.
the thing I was thinking about though is I think like having all of this interdisciplinary musicianship and I think you knocked yourself on sight reading earlier. I think there can be a stigma. It's like, oh, well, if you could sight read perfectly,
Mhm.
you're not gonna emotionally invest in the music or whatever. I think that's, pardon my
Well,
French. I think it's horseshit. I think that being able to sight read just gets you closer to being able to be at that musical precipice faster. And if if I could have one skill double at this point in my life, it would be my sight reading ability.
I will say this too, whereas like where I can like maybe perhaps we can find reason for why that stigma exists is like there are people
Mm,
that I guess don't want or feel like they shouldn't have to, or either they don't want to or shouldn't have to, but oh, I can
yeah,
just read this, read again, maybe perhaps focusing too much on playing the correct notes and the correct rhythms and more about
yeah,
the actual conviction of it. Whereas there are people that do that are like you said exactly what you're doing. Like yeah, I can start read well enough that I can actually do a bit more with the music. I want
yeah,
to do more with it. Whereas
yeah,
there are those that just want to do the bare minimum and think that, oh, if I can read correctly, then I don't need to practice it.
yeah. I
And
think
it's,
people talk shit because it's hard. Like
yeah,
seriously, I
yeah.
think people talk shit because it's hard, and they're upset that other people can do it better than them.
That should be the honestly that should be the emotional catalyst to then practice more. Just
Yeah,
because it shows that it's humanely possible. So
yeah,
you gotta it shows it. So
yeah.
yeah, that's cool. But so yeah, I was pretty much doing like 3 inches because another thing that I actually slept on in past times I talked about my story. It was like, and also, this also happened in eighth grade. God, how did I survive eighth grade? Now when I'm
I don't know,
retelling
man.
all these, I don't know what happened. I also was invited to to this this church in San, where like I'm getting like I wasn't like crazy into religion. Like my family were like we're like kind of Pentecostal, but
Mhm.
no, we're definitely more in the spiritual. But like but I was invited to like be this to play the organ in this church, but it was kind of like more like piano, but it was a really like high quality like electric. It was like full on like electric uprights.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it was an actual upright with a built-in synthesizer. So I was actually able to
Wow,
go through like actually some pretty high quality sounds at the time. Like you hear the like when it was I remember playing the saxophone sound and you actually hear the breathiness a lot. I was like, wow, okay, this is
that's
actually
sick.
so I would play around. So but but from playing those those songs and hymns and worship songs, like I actually got a handle on piano a lot more too, and also chords. I was
Mm,
understanding triadic harmony because of that. I got a better sense of that, and I was able to even solo a lot at times. But
that's
don't worry,
awesome.
I wasn't crazy. So I was just like doing a lot of like fun stuff with chords. That's all. Like I'm no prodigy, but so
But
I
you were trying
do.
it out and you had access to something.
I had
I think that's
access. Yeah,
profound.
I was no, I'm very grateful for them for giving me the opportunity to be that. And I realized, oh, I actually do a lot what black churches do a lot these days. Where I'm playing during like the stuff. Like I realized I did a lot more then than I gave myself credit for.
Yeah,
And again, that also was a big. It was very instrumental into like my musical education. Was because I actually had a chord book and I actually learned a little bit about music theory, just enough to get me by.
that's awesome.
So yeah, I do cherish that. And then JMU came around and I focused on horn. I put the cello down for a bit because I had to focus on some things. I kept trombone around for jazz groups, but I was only able to do the jazz band with my final semester of undergrad. I actually had room in my schedule, and no, that was that was the semester where I was literally playing three instruments. So I was playing tenor horn for brass band. I was playing orchestra on horn because I got placed in orchestra then, and of course I was like lead bone for the jazz, not like the second group of jazz band, because like playing horn helped my trombone chops when I came back. I was like, oh wow, I can play
Yeah,
high a lot easier now. It's kind of
yeah.
weird how
I
that
mean,
works.
I know that
That's
like that was probably a lot, but like that probably like
what it
forged your
was.
musical brain and like tempered your musical
I
brain
love
like
doing.
nothing else because you got to do all that transposition and you got to
Yeah,
listen and play
it
in all
hurt at the
those
beginning,
different
but I loved it.
styles.
It was worth it.
Yeah, I mean,
It was
I
gratifying to
bet
me.
that stretched you like nothing else ever before. But like,
Yeah.
it's probably I think about like working the mind like a blacksmith would forge a sword, right? Do you know what
Hmm.
Damascus steel is? This is
I've
so
heard of it a
weird. I
lot.
talk about
I've
stuff
heard.
like this all
Please.
the time because I'm a weirdo. But like, Damascus
There you go.
steel is a high carbon steel that's been folded a minimum of 10,000 times. But
Wow.
so like when you have a piece of steel that's folded, it's exponential,
Yeah.
right? Because it's been
Mhm.
folded twice, and then it's four times, and it's eight times, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And Damascus steel, it doesn't finalize the process until it's been tempered in oil. And what the tempering oil does is it allows the crystalline structure of the steel to become perfect rather than having any imperfections. And in that folding, what you're doing is you're squishing the atoms so close together that you enable a perfectly aligned chemical structure, which is what makes
Wow.
like it super difficult to break. I mean, a Damascus steel was built for like swords and armor that were like notoriously difficult to nigh impossible to damage. You get these like mythical tales of like the belief is that the sword Excalibur from the Arthurian legend was probably a sword from the Roman Empire that was built out of Damascus steel because it was that and it just happened to be picked up by some mythical king in the ancient time in Great Britain because this supposedly magical sword would be struck with the iron swords that the early Britannians were using, and these iron swords would shatter because like they're made of an obviously imperfect chemical structure compared to like how tempered and perfected the steel was.
Yeah.
And I think that like all of that musical experience asking such insane cognitive demands of your brain, I think it tempered it into a place that's really powerful. So like it's really cool to listen to you talk about that because I think a lot of people hear all of that and they're like, wow, that sounds overwhelming. It's like, yeah, but like
It
the point
was.
isn't that you worry about how difficult it is. It's that you show up and do your best and you'll you'll never be
Hmm.
able to imagine how much you will grow from it.
Exactly. I'll share another experience where perhaps it was too overwhelming because then COVID came like
Yeah,
out of nowhere. Where it's like it was that spring of 2020. I was getting good at horn, where I got placed in like into the Winston thing for the first time. It was like our top group.
that's awesome.
But at the same time, we were doing Mall 6 that semester too. So I actually got placed on second horn for that Mall for Mall 6, and man, and of course, and for those that don't know horn lore, that second horn is like the principal low horn. of
Mhm.
the of how Mahler scores his horns, because one three the odds are the high horns and the evens are the low horns, which are, again, they're both
Mhm.
two different specialties.
Yeah.
And so, but and I was definitely like a low horn fan kind of guy, which ironically enough don't do enough in recent pieces, which I might, well, not might, I will. I just have to find the right context for him. But in any case, like, I was so excited, but that was a very, very stressful semester. Like, I was like, what, I was averaging 21 credits every semester anyway, because I didn't, like, I wasn't the brightest. I mean, I got my act together in high school after, like, so freshman year I got like a C in my, freshman history class, right? But and then because of that, basically my mother forbade me from going on the Disney trip that the school was going on, and I was like,
Dang.
and I've never been to Disneyland before. Sorry, Disney World, because it was from
Yeah.
Florida. And I've not, I mean, I rarely traveled around the states. Like, the southest I've ever gone was like North Carolina, and so I was destroyed. I was
Yeah.
so I was so disappointed at that, and so that told me that, okay, I need to get better with my grades. Like, I wasn't a rebel. I just didn't put like a lot of effort that I should be doing, or I realized I should be doing. And so I got good and eventually started getting more and more, a lot all A's by senior year. Eventually getting a 4.0 at some point, but now it's like weird. Not that important, because with AP classes, people get almost 5.0s these days because the scale's broken.
Yeah.
But I didn't have a lot of, but because of that, my lateness to it, like, I didn't get a whole lot. I mean, I didn't get any college credit. Like, the closest I could have gotten was AP Stats. It was like my senior year, and of course I got two on that exam. But even though math was like my strongest suit, but that's so I had to take, every gen ed class under the sun, which, again, it's not really the worst thing in the world. But because of the music major, I'm now, all the extra stuff that you enroll in, right? I'm now, 21, had to get approvals every semester, because, and it actually wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. It's like, it sounds horrific. I mean, believe me, it was not easy. Because I know, like, I go to college because, like, I know, like, I'm there to learn. I'm there to get better at it. There's a reason
Yeah.
I'm here. It was just like part of, I mean, I'm not really a huge party type, but now these days I'm more apt to hang out with friends and do some shenanigans. Whereas college, I was a little more hesitant because, well, I kind of already I already knew I kind of wanted to go to grad school. I wanted to
Yeah.
continue learning, and I was already researching film scoring graduate programs, because that's when that
Oh.
bug hit. And so I was like, well, if I want to get to grad school, I need to be good I need to have good grades in undergrad. So
Yeah.
I, like, and again, perhaps my introvert helped out as well. Like, I wasn't, huge into parties, since, like, I didn't see a lot of reasons for, the
Yeah.
crazy stuff that people were doing. I wasn't seeing it.
Mhm.
I'm sure people can make plenty of arguments for it, but for me, it's just like, for me. And then I was perfectly
Yeah.
fine staying at home with, with the YouTube entertainment I grew up with,
Yeah.
because there's always new stuff happening. Some laughs. I laugh at least once a day, because that's important to laugh a lot.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So
It's the
important.
best
So
medicine, man.
so I was like, I don't need parties. I got
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
time. So with
I think
entertainments.
I think there's a big difference between going to a party and going to a hang,
Yeah.
and um, uh, I think that I don't know that I would have been able to become the composer that I am today if I hadn't gone to the hang. So one thing
Exactly.
my teacher my euphonium teacher in undergrad always told me is like you always go to the hang because
Mm-hmm.
you never that's where the business happens. You never know where you're gonna
Yes.
meet. You never know who you're gonna meet. You never know where it's gonna go. And it could be I mean like think about Midwest. If I hadn't
Oh
gone to the
yeah.
hang of Midwest, I wouldn't
We'd
have
have
met
never
you
met
and we
you.
wouldn't have done this
Yeah.
podcast. And that's
Exactly, right?
crazy.
No, that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Hangs are important, but then there's the
Yeah.
parties that are
Yeah.
like, I mean, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I think
it's all up to
when
you.
I yeah, when I think about a college party, I think about something that's getting out of hand where that's not necessarily a productive use of your time. And that's not to say that once
Exactly.
in a while
Yeah.
it can be fun every once in a while, but if you're
It's
doing
like,
that all the time, like you're not going to figure stuff out. But going to a hang, like
oh, hangs are,
especially when I was in
for
college, like
sure.
yeah, go over to my friend's place. We're gonna sit around and listen to music for a little
Oh
while, maybe have a beer.
yes,
That is
yes.
that's
I
an
do that too.
important human activity. If you're not doing that, you're not connecting with other people.
Absolutely. No, I agree with a lot of that. And frankly, I have been to a couple of college parties, because they're all with friends. Like, they're people
Yeah.
I've known, and so they're all, they're pretty much, band kid parties. And so I
Oh yeah, but those are like fun.
Yeah, those are fun. Those are fun to a degree. No, believe me, I actually,
Yeah.
like, I know how to, like, I think I've developed some sort of talent. Like, I don't need to get drunk, or like I've actually never been drunk, but I've drank before, but I've
I
never
would
been
keep
drunk.
it that way.
And honestly,
It's
we'll
just,
see
it's
that.
not worth it, man.
I'm glad you
Like,
share that because like I don't see
well,
it.
like, I mean,
Like
like,
it's hard for me to see like why do I want to relinquish all of my motor control where like I could literally put myself in a position to do something really bad
yeah.
and
Well, I mean,
detrimental
like,
and get someone in trouble.
there's no like psychological experience you can achieve with like a substance like alcohol that you couldn't do with the right amount of music and breath work and dance.
Mm-hmm.
And
Exactly.
like, and one of those is dramatically healthier than the other for a lot of reasons.
Yes, yes. So, but
Um,
the thing is, like, I went to this place, but the music, I mean, it was perfectly expected. These huge, heavy rages with the bass is just pounding your head. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't like. I love me some bass, but like, not that
yeah.
where like it legit gives me headaches and it hurts. Like, it's that's not me. But what I was gonna say before I talk about drum was like, I've definitely developed a time where, like I know how to have fun at a party like without
Oh, of course.
getting drunk, and like I know how to like not be like that an introvert kid that's just like, oh, I wish I was back in my cave. But like I know how to like I've learned to talk to people, converse, joke around,
Yeah.
gaslight them just a little bit, especially when they're under the influence because they get some fun stuff. But it's like because like I can be crazy without being drunk. Like
Yeah.
I can't be like you don't want to see you don't want to see that because I don't want to see it. I don't know what happens, but I get crazy enough, dude. I'm crazy enough sober, so I think that's all. That's all you need out of me. So, but like I said, the hangs, yes, absolutely. Like the
Yeah.
studio hangs, the friend hangs, the post concert hangs. Like yes, I went almost every one of those, and the
Yeah.
friendships I made from those are invaluable.
Yeah, the hang I've started to look forward to the most that I have on a regular basis here at Illinois is we have a coffee hang on Wednesday mornings at 8 a.m. So
Ooh,
the Tuba and Euphonium studio here has warm up class every Wednesday from 7 to 7:45.
what?
Yep.
That was
And if
loud.
you miss two, you fail lessons. It's crazy. Um,
Oh
but but we like there's a coffee shop 2 doors down from the music building, and a bunch of us go get coffee at 8 a.m. on Wednesday after warm up class, and it's so fun because
my god!
all
No,
we
I bet
do
it is.
we
Yeah.
just shoot the shit and make fun of each other and just have a good time, and it's
Yes.
great.
Absolutely. No.
And
No.
it's that
That's
perfect example of what you were talking about. Like, yeah, it doesn't
exactly.
have to be crazy to have a good time. You just need to be in the room with people that you like.
Exactly. And you never know. Like I said, you never know what can spawn from that. They're just good friends or
Yeah,
just great connections. But I do want to preface this, especially like when I talk about well, to be, I mean, any sort of great businessman or just maybe just any great professional in general, I suppose, right? Is that you need to be a good human being. Like you
yeah,
need to be like you need to be someone that people are like to work with. Like don't
yeah,
like this I mean it seems obvious, but yet there are people that don't realize that like if you act like a jerk or some
yeah.
pretentious a-hole, then like you're not gonna get a lot of workshop opportunities because like people are not gonna have the experience with you, especially if you're not like paying attention to what you're saying and like exerting a lot of things that don't really need to be said and like doing a
Yeah,
lot of false stuff. So like being a good important person, but being a good friend as well. So I know like sometimes because I'm going to say this very carefully. When you make good friends, do not expect to get anything out of them.
oh yeah,
Like you have to be careful to not think too hard that way. Like yeah,
yeah,
like oh if I make or we're making friends for the sake of getting
yeah,
projects. Like also, yes, projects can come out of friendships, but if you're focusing on getting the projects out of being friends,
yeah.
then
That's manipulative.
exactly that is
Yeah.
manipulation, which is
Um,
not healthy.
the way I think about it, and like it took me a little bit to like mathematically put this out this way, but like this is the philosophy I try to go with. Being popular is easy. All you have to do is be nice to everybody. And like
Whoa, what?
want like 'cause who doesn't want like to be around people who are nice. Like there's this weird primordial categorization that happens in high school where based on interests and like physical attractiveness we've decided, and like weird amounts of like perceived tradition through film and TV shows, we decided to like categorize everybody who goes into high school and create a social structure about it. But it's all horseshit because in the end people want to know people who are nice.
Exactly,
And
right?
like I was talking with somebody about putting together a recording session the other day, and they were like, "Yeah, so for interior, Andrew, you told me you like got 60 musicians. How'd you do that?" And I was like, "I asked my friends, and when I realized that I had certain sections where I didn't have enough friends to fill all of it, I asked my friends who they trusted and who was cool and who was good. And then when I reached out to those people, I told them, hey, my friend personally recommended you. And then they were like all about it because they were like, wow, somebody thought about me to be a part of this. And I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, somebody thought of you. And because if my friend trusts you, I'm willing to trust you too. This is going to be great and we're going to have an awesome time. And I think that's part of the reason why that recording of Interior came out so well. Everybody wanted to be there and felt happy to be there and were excited about the project. And and quite frankly, like, well, and so this person was like, okay, so what do I need to do to get more friends? And I was like, be nice and ask people how they're doing and mean it. like, guys,
Wow.
this isn't
I guess
rocket
so hard
science.
for you
It's not
people.
even it's not even pitch class set theory. It's just like, like
It's not comparing analysis.
yeah,
Oh
like
God.
it's like this.
Yeah.
It's not
Just
so difficult.
just
And
being social.
like when you ask people like how they're doing and you mean it and you do it often enough that it's weird when you don't ask them that, then you might not be super close friends, but you're at least friends.
Exactly. And then it's those that, again, when you're not looking, when you're not focusing so much on it, then that's when those opportunities will arise. When
Yeah.
those projects come, it's like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting this, but this is great. I'll take it. Let's work on this. And so
Yeah.
yeah, just know, like, really think about your priorities. Like, yeah, like, oh, I really wish I became friends with this person, so that way I can potentially do something with them. It's like, yeah, there are times like I might think about that, but it's like
Yeah.
I don't want to like just force myself to become friends. Like, I'm gonna wait. I will wait. I will live my life and wait for that opportunity to like naturally arise. Like, oh no,
Yeah.
oh hi, I'm a big fan of your work, and it's great to meet you. And then if you're able to,
Mhm.
give me anything about your
Yeah.
stuff, but that's cool. But otherwise, that's it. You leave it unless they
Yeah, something I
actually.
was just thinking about while we're on this train of thought is
Yeah.
going back to writing for your friends. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a quote from a man named Seth Godin. I don't know if he's somebody you've heard of. He's kind of a business guru. He's really cool.
Seth Godin.
But his quote is, "If you want to be gifted or considered gifted, then you need to give gifts." And so when I think
Mm.
about writing for my friends, especially for like people who are looking to start composing or young composers that are listening, like. Um, if you write for your friends, yeah, like you're giving your time and your talent and your effort to your friends. That's a very profound gift. Like that yields a lot of connection. And even if it's just as simple as like, hey, I know you have a recital coming up next semester. I'd love to write you something. Well, like yeah, you're probably not going to get any money out of it, but like that piece got written and it got performed and it got premiered, and that's a lot to include on a CV. And yeah, maybe it's not a lot
Yeah.
right now, but in like 6 years of doing that, then suddenly your
Yeah.
catalog is like 6 sheets of paper, and you're like, wow, when
Mm-hmm.
did all of this music get written?
Exactly. Exactly. And it goes back to that second part of that first part of that quote, right? When it says write for your friends, but never stop writing. Like,
Yeah,
you have to keep writing. Like, I never, like I said, once I finished that first piece, I mean, this was obviously before I even met Brian for the first time, because I've been a fan of his works a lot up until that point. So I was really like, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm meeting him. He's here. He's
hmm,
literally standing before me. But it's like you gotta keep working. Like you can't just take like take like a high like hey hiatus. Yes, I mean, yeah, that's like this thing you have to think about, like, when to take a hiatus. But if you're
yeah,
starting now, like, I mean, you're only you're, every time you write a piece, you're stronger as a composer. Like, you get stronger as you think. You
yeah,
get stronger as you, well, from the logistical side of things when you're composing, like how to engrave, or how to talk about getting it marketed somewhere, or all that stuff. like
Hmm.
the administrative duties that a composer doesn't expect to do. But and of course that's just my other part of the brain. My actual part that like structure is the admin type. Like I do like the emails. I like the doing like setting up my websites and making sure it's up to date. I actually just filed. I mean, I'm in a place where I mean, I hope this isn't juvenile decision, but I mean, I did have talking where I felt like, okay, I think this is the next step for me. I'm officially an LLC because
No, I
like
think that's smart.
the money I'm getting, because I would grant the okay, because I have to start. I actually have to file taxes this year based
Yeah.
on the money I've been getting. And like
Yeah, well,
obviously
and it makes
it's nothing huge,
sense.
but it's like it's enough. It's like, oh, I gotta
I mean,
actually
it's
file
infinitely
this.
lower as an LLC than it is as like an independent contracted like small business, which
So
I mean, like that's a whole nother podcast
as a
because it's
whole other
crazy how
discussion,
that tax
yes,
structure is. But I mean,
it
like when
is.
you're lowering it from like 52 to like 21%, like that's so much money.
Exactly. So I feel like it's important, that, especially I'm doing it to help me get better with money as well. Because I know this year there'll be some big stuff has like I need to make sure
That's
that
awesome, man.
all the stuff is. I know I again I keep saying this, but I'm like obviously like people. I mean, there's the like the 1%. I mean, maybe it's crazy more than 1%. I think like, oh, I just got this because I'm, not white or something. But like, no, I worked. You heard my story. I worked for this, bro.
Yeah, man.
Like I like and yeah, there it's like there are times where it's like I I took the step forward. Like I took the step
Hmm.
to do the work to learn how this works. Like I didn't
Yeah.
just sit by waiting for someone to be like, give me a chance. Like, well, I have nothing to show them that I am worthy of giving a chance. And that's how
Hmm.
I kind of feel about with this orchestra medium with Joy of the Soul, because like I was not expecting to get any sort of orchestra, or at least from a professional symphony this early. Like
Hmm.
I know that might sound pretentious to some people, that wording, because like because I do want, because like believe me, I do want to get commissioned by professional,
Yeah.
just like how insane heckin' awesome that would be. And I
Yeah.
mean any commission is awesome, but that's just something I mean I've always loved the orchestra. I mean I'll tell you this, a song that I grew up a lot with from my dad especially is this arranger who turned orchestrator. God, I'm thinking of the wrong name. Barry White and his tune called Love Theme, done by the Love Unlimited Orchestra. Uh, and it was, I mean, it starts with these flourishing, like little flourishes of flute and violin for like 2 bars. It's that vibe, that late disco
Hmm.
vibe, and it
Yeah.
goes, and of course the high strings sustains while the beat goes. Like that was like my first like, whoa, what is that? That's an orchestra. I'm like, what? That's
Yeah.
beautiful. And then mixed with the Western canon, of course, other things that orchestra is being used with. It's like orchestra's in a special heart and place for me. While band is also in a special place, just as much as orchestra is. Like I love them both just equally because they're both important to me, and of course, and any other performing ensemble. But just like I'm saying, it's like, I mean, yeah, I work for this, and it's like, I mean, if you wanted to get stuff, you have to work for it. You have to prove it. Like with orchestra, I felt
Yeah.
like I had to prove that yes, I am capable of writing for these strings. Because like
Oh, yeah.
I feel like this way with with the composition contests, right? That involve
Hmm.
orchestra or even any string instrument. Like they go ham. Like I would argue that they would go ham with when looking at string parts, because like winds. Like, I mean, like those are
Yeah.
like again, any right for any instrument can be hard, but
Yeah.
strings are, but like they're different. They're hard in a different way that requires people special attention, because I mean it's right in front of you in a performance, right? The first section you're
Hmm.
seeing is a whole lot of strings. Just how you would see winds in a band,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because I think the positioning is also important as well, which I
Hmm.
mean it has been established throughout history, right, and through the canon. And so knowing that I am comfortable, especially I had a handful of string heavy pieces, which I
Hmm.
think definitely helped me prove that yeah I am capable. I I've learned, I've grown, and I think I'm ready, and it showed that I'm ready for
Yeah.
the next step. And so
Yeah.
that's
I
what I
think
tell people.
having,
It's like
I
you need
think
like
for,
evidence. It's like
yeah, I think,
evidence for like a trial.
yeah,
What are you saying?
you need to curate portfolios for applications to the audience that is going to receive them. I mean, like, and in
Exactly.
a lot of respects, like, most composers want to know, like, can you write for strings? Can you write for piano? And maybe can you write for voice? If you can do
Mm-hmm.
that, You the it's fairly easy to assume that you can do a lot of other stuff too,
Mm-hmm.
because they have a lot of intricacy to learning how they do things well. However, um, because and they're really marketable. So if
Exactly.
you can do that, the odds that you can get to other things is like pretty doable. Like I made the mistake last year of including a duet for contra sarusophones in my portfolio. Which do you know what a sarusophone is?
I've never heard that instrument before. What is
So I don't remember what Mr. Saris is like his first name is, but so he was an instrument builder in France in the 18th century or 20th century, 1900s ish. But so like it's basically a double reed saxophone is a way to think about this, and they're
Ooh.
typically pitched in E flat and B flat. Though some contrasarusophones are in C, there's not very many of them. They use the old saxophone key system, so if
Mm.
you're a saxophonist, they're pretty
Yeah.
easy to pick up. You just have to figure out basically a little wider than bassoon embouchure. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but so University of Illinois has a couple of we have actually have a whole choir of saxophones here. They're not played very much,
What?
but yeah, I mean, so the university and the band program here hosts the John Philip Sousa Archives and the Center for American Music, and so there's a lot of historical instruments that we just happen to have because we're the oldest band department in the country. And so we have been trying to find more opportunities to get some of these out. And so my friend Lucy and my friend Joe were working with these sarusophones because we had the contra sarusophone restored from when we played Florence Schmidt's Dionysiach at the American Bandmasters Association Festival a few years ago. That was a crazy performance. So fun. If you don't know that piece, you should look it up. It's like Rite of Spring, but for band. It's awesome, and it's
Well,
about Dionysiach, um, Dionysus. It's like Dionysus, the Greek god. The Marine Band actually played this piece at Midwest this year.
which okay,
Um,
which band did that this year?
the Marine Band played Dionysiach at Midwest this
Oh,
year. Yeah, I mean it's a
what
really cool piece. It's
was
like
it the chamber one
no, it was at
with the full band that
yes,
changed the
full
power?
band. It was at the
What?
end of
I
the
was
first
there.
concert that Colonel Fettig did. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it was really cool. So this piece is about the rituals of the cult of Dionysus from Greece. Um, and so basically, it tries to paint an impressionist painting via sound of these cults that would get high on um, wine laced with ergot and other psychoactive substances and then like whip themselves into a frenzy and like go nuts. I mean, the really ironic part about these kind of cults is like this is also where like the ideas of democracy came from. So it's like really wild history to study, but like interesting to do like create music about. And Florence Schmidt was living in Paris and was friends with Stravinsky, and so like actually there's a lot of stuff with Rite of Spring that influenced this piece. So
Hmm.
really awesome work. But so the original scoring of Dionysiach uses I think a full sarrusophone ensemble. It's like really wild instrumentation. And so in order to help capture that sound, we had our C contrabass sarrusophone restored and we substituted it for the contrabassoon in order to have some of that color, which is a really, really cool uh, artistic choice that our director our former director of bands, Steve Peterson made. It was really, really fun. But so we had one restored, and so we have an E flat contra sarrusophone. That they decided to restore that one too, so that we could have a fully functioning sarrusophone ensemble if we wanted to start one, because these two instruments had just fallen into disrepair. Um, but somebody I know, Carl Thacker, is a technician that's near here, and he's like world class. So he restored it for us. And so for their multi woodwind recital, my friends Lucy and Joe that I mentioned decided they wanted to do a piece with saxophones, and there's not really been any music written for contra sousaphones, and so they asked me to write one for them. And it was really cool to be able to write for like a super obscure instrument like that and think about like, well, what does this make me think of, and how can I like try to play with the complexity of the overtones that these get, and what is that? But like, and was it a super fun experience? Yes. Wouldn't trade it for the world. Would never ever think that writing that piece was a bad decision. Submitting it for graduate school might not have been the greatest decision because, like, yeah, it's really unique to say, like, hey, look at this piece that I've written that's like not like anything else any other composition student in the country has written. Yeah, that's kind of cool, but like, that doesn't show the way I think or the level that my fundamentals are at, like a string quartet might,
Hmm.
even if it can add a lot of flavor. And so I think a piece
Interesting.
like that would, in a portfolio, would probably be the icing on the cake rather than something near the core of it. And that I think that's the
Hmm.
problem is like last year, I think my portfolio was all icing and not enough cake. And like icing's
That's a good
great,
point.
but it's
That's a
gotta
good.
have cake.
Cake or else it's just empty, dude. It's like you're just
Yeah.
eating. It's like calories are not worth it, bro. Because there's no cake for it. That's actually the point you brought up. About, like, you know, you're referring to how much, your pieces that you choose for an application, right? That you chose, that analogy you chose with frosting the cake. It's like, yeah, there are probably pieces you want to show that you understand the conventions of which this canon, or this aesthetic that you're wanting to continue writing for,
Yeah.
came from. A piece that that shows them that yes, you understand the roots, but yet you're also not afraid to do something new
Yeah.
because you know those roots. You use those as a way of, it's like that thing of like knowing like learning the rules so you can break them the right way.
Yeah.
Like, like
Totally.
it's kind of like that. And so it's actually, and I think that's probably really important, especially
Yeah.
with someone that doesn't know you, and you only get three pieces, right, to
Yeah.
show your entirety of how you think and where you
Yeah.
are.
I think people should break rules kind of like Stravinsky did. When I think of how Stravinsky breaks rules, a lot of people think like, "Oh, I can break the rules," and they just break them. But Stravinsky, he's like, he has a pencil and he's like, "You ready for this?" And people are like, "Don't do it, don't do it." And then he's just like he just starts and then it snaps. And so you get this like this dramatic arc of like, "I'm going to break it." And everybody goes, "Please no." And
I
he goes,
beg.
"And now you have to watch me break it." but
That's
but like
hilarious.
but thinking about it that way I think is actually really helpful because then you get it makes it really easy to understand. It's like, okay, I have to start before it's broken, and by the end it can be broken. And the
Exactly.
trauma of watching that happen is part of what's so satisfying about it because you get the time to prove like, yeah, I can do what I'm supposed to do, but you know what's way cooler? Doing what I'm not supposed to do.
It's actually really clever. No, that's not clever. But it's like, I feel like it's important, especially when you're seeing like new composers that are starting out, right? Like
Hmm.
they're like still like figuring out what they actually like to write, and then they get accepted for bachelor's program, right? But yeah,
Hmm.
and yeah, but then you see them, going, balls to the walls immediately. Like you see them writing the craziest stuff immediately, where it doesn't seem enough of like then it doesn't need to be some fundamentals piece, but like there needs to be
Yeah.
some evidence that shows that you understand what this instrument was made for,
Hmm.
and why we love, and why a lot of people love this instrument, and then
Yeah.
but then at the same time knowing that, challenging it while
Yeah.
also respecting it, but at the same time challenging it. I
I
think that's the big thing. Yeah, like you talk about, like I think some like there are some new songs you understand the roots of what you're doing, and
yeah.
show that you understand the roots while also challenging it the same way. And
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people want to write something that's super complex because complexity is really interesting. But like
it is interesting, but
writing with a lot of complexity is like
it's a whole
way
music
easier
follows
than
too.
people give it credit for. Like you could throw paint at the wall, but you don't have to throw paint at the wall. Like I mean, a 3 against 4 against 5 is a very complex rhythmic pattern, but
Mm-hmm.
like in isolation, it's honestly pretty simple. It's just 3 against 4 against 5. But when you put it together, it's like so much greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's something a lot of composers miss. That it doesn't have to be like you don't have to reinvent. Well, you, I feel like I reinvent the wheel for every piece a little bit, but like not in a bad way. What I think about is like I want to imagine every piece from the ground up so that it's its own thing. And it's not, I don't get into the groove of like I know some folks who look at composers and are like, "Oh, all of their music is the same." And I think that's a little unfair. But one composer I have an immense amount of respect for right now is Viet Quang, because I feel like every piece that he writes is like I know it's his immediately because I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, this is Viet
Yeah.
Quang's. But at the same point, they're all so different from one another, and they're all
Hmm.
so satisfying in their own way. And I think that that's I can't imagine the amount of actually I can't start to imagine the amount of work that takes, but I think that that's the mark of like a really incredible artist.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I was very fortunate. He did a master class in November when they, when I had Violsign's got his UT premiere with eighth Blackbird, and so
Wow.
no, that was a heck of an amazing concert. But we
Yeah,
would
that
do a
sounds
master class
incredible.
where I got to learn his story and actually learn what he was doing with the neurals, like that kind of like delay effect, and I was confirmed. Oh, it is a written out delay effect he's doing,
Yeah.
and you hear in all his other chamber pieces like this cello recording, like a recording project, which is so, oh, I gotta find that recording again. That piece is heckin' amazing,
Hmm.
um, with his style. But no, I do get hear people and where it feels like, oh, his pieces, they sound almost too similar. But I don't know, it's like it's too sure. Yeah, they say that about Mac sometimes too. But uh,
They
I
said
don't
about
know.
who? Sorry.
Oh, Mackie,
Yeah, I don't know. Like
I'm not sure.
there were times there are things that I think John has written that are like unequivocally some of the most interesting things in the medium. And when they're really unique, they're like they're so satisfying. Like his trombone concerto comes to mind. His piece Frozen Cathedral comes to mind.
Oh
I don't
gosh, I
like
can start
I
taking a page out of that for your Cathedral Lake movement. I love that. By the way, that's my favorite movement that you
really?
piece.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, like all the movements are great, but like, I love how you open with that sax quartet
Thanks,
later
man.
on after dice out. Like that is, but
Yeah,
you did, that was a very smart choice using sax quartet there. It's
I
so good.
saxophone quartet. I think
I love sax
not
quartet.
enough wind ensemble writers highlight the saxophone quartet because it's
Yep,
the only large ensemble that it appears in, and honestly, saxophone quartet is probably the most technically capable chamber ensemble. Those cats
absolutely.
can play
I know. Yes,
anything.
I
And
know.
I feel really lucky. The saxophone quartet at I mean the graduate saxophone quartet at Illinois is always great because
Mm-hmm.
we have a legendary saxophone professor in Professor Deborah Richtmeyer. But um,
Mm-hmm.
the saxophone quartet on campus right now is really special. They're
Absolutely.
and I have the really good fortune to be friends with all of them. And so it was one of those things where like that I was thinking about them when I wrote that saxophone quartet. And I was like and thinking about okay, like how would I write something that was beautiful in a way that those folks would execute to a level that would frighten people with how beautiful it is.
Exactly.
And that goes back to what we were saying earlier of like write for your friends. If you know somebody who's really good at something, it's like ask them like, "Hey, I'm writing this." Or even just think about them. Like you don't even have to show them. Like I don't know that my friends know that I wrote that and I was thinking about them, but I was. I was
Absolutely.
thinking about how beautiful my friend Jonathan plays soprano and alto saxophone. It's like, okay, if he's going to introduce the melody, how would I write it so that like that reminds me of how beautiful he plays.
Absolutely. And it's cool. Like, especially harping on that same comment. Like I do that, like, especially with when it comes to pieces that are nearing completion. That, like with Joy of the Soul, right? That I mean, I've done this with earlier pieces, but like I like will actually go around to my friends with, like, when I'm writing large ensemble pieces, so I'm writing something that I'm actually not sure how that would lay on the horn or on the
Yeah.
fingers. Like I have a really good fundamental knowledge of like most, prominent instruments, than wind and strings. But there are just some things where I challenge myself. I go a little farther and say, okay, let me get this checked out by a player. So someone that obviously has studied a lot more than the years I've done, and just to give me the heads up. Because there were times where I'm comfortable with like 90% of most of the material, which enjoy this, so I was. But then there were just some string patterns. I'm like, okay, I do my best in the process to visualize how that would look,
Mm-hmm.
because but how it would look on the strings. But then there's that point. Okay, I need to get that just check one more time with an actual violin. So see them actually playing it, because the thing I love to do is watching the players perform.
Yeah.
I think the visual aspect is also really important. Well, but not really important, but I think it's underutilized. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, it is used, but like I feel like that could be more done, but not like doing like some hornballs like a marching band, but who knows? But like just doing more visuals. Like there's Poor Enjoy the Soul, which I'm sure if you I know you listen to. There was that middle point where the violas and strings are doing like triplets on just that concert, like middle concert A or below no ceiling.
Yeah.
But visually, but I wrote it in a way that visually you would see the accents, right? The accents, the pulses
Mm-hmm.
go duck, 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 with their bows. You would see
Mm-hmm.
it go like almost in like not a rainbow, but like that the kind of shape pattern. You just see it,
Yeah.
and it's just a little bit of visual spectacle, and
Yeah.
and I feel like it's something. Yeah, I think that composers, some that I guess don't realize that they can do, and
Oh yeah.
because we go through live performances, right? Yeah, music, obviously the auditory is probably the biggest deal, but we're also seeing them perform,
Yeah.
and if we can make them, and if we can write music that makes them perform, like
Mm-hmm.
really getting into the music and selling the
Yeah.
story, not only the music but with their faces
Yeah.
and their expressions, then that's going to leave a much bigger impact on even non-musicians that are in the audience. Like,
Oh yeah. I mean, like,
yeah,
so
they might enjoy the music, like they might enjoy it, but they see the performers going in, and like
yeah.
that there's some universal
There's
translation.
so something I learned this year was like um I didn't know the dates for Pines of Rome, even though I knew the piece really well. So
Mm-hmm.
Pines of Rome was written in like the 1910s, which
Mm.
is like a long time ago.
Yeah,
But something that's really interesting about that piece, when you think about like experiencing live music in a concert hall, it has an electroacoustic element because there's recording of Mockingbird
yeah,
in the third movement. There's an offstage trumpet solo and an
yeah.
offstage brass ensemble.
Gosh.
So thinking about
Okay.
staging in that way, but then when I was reading the program notes, so I saw the CSO play Pines in April,
Okay.
um, which
Wow.
was awesome. But like, there's this moment in the piece where there's motives that are flicking back and forth in between the strings, and I never thought about thinking about like the panning across an orchestra like that. But that kind of goes to what you were talking about of the theatrics of like how the motive is being passed around the group and why, and not just like on a score level, because it can be really cool to think about passing something up or down the score, but like it's not the same as like being able to experiment with it visually. And like I think composers should think about doing both. I
I
mean,
think so too.
I think you should have to think about doing both. Otherwise, like, have you really examined every aspect of this piece that you could? If it's going to be played by real musicians in a real space and people are going to sit there and listen to it, like, give them a show.
Like the only thing that you would never have to worry about visually is just streaming, right?
Yeah.
Streaming services, right? It's like even if it was like music videos, but like if because I know there are music creators out there that write specifically for streaming services, they maybe have never done a live performance before, which probably sounds unlikely to happen, but there are those that that
Hmm.
prefer to do the streaming service thing, and while that is helpful, right? Because again,
Yeah.
it's a way to access it, but like so the experience can be experienced tenfold and will also help you and definitely in the long run and short term by having it performed live. But now with that, do you have another element? Do you have spatial, right? Like of course you can do spatial within a DAW, right? You get things to pan different ways. You can
Hmm.
do things with stereos and quad channels or even 8 channel electronic outlets, but having the people there, having the human aspect there, again, like you said, there's a lot more that can be done, which But I
Yeah.
think this, I would say that this, but in order to, because I think there are musicians. Well, I guess it all depends on the musicians themselves, right? Like
Mm.
trying to find a way to think, okay, well, what visual things do you want to do with the orchestra, and would they be able to do it? Would they be comfortable doing it? Like a, for example, like composer Clarissa Saad. I don't know if you've heard of her, but but she, I mean, I forget the name of these pieces, like, but she does these pieces where, well, she likes getting the orchestra to do more than just play.
Mm.
Like she likes to get them to sing, she likes to get them to do a little bit of stomping. Like yes,
Yeah.
we've heard plenty of band pieces that do that, but but to actually go ham with it and to
Mm.
do, yeah, just do more. But I can understand that, if they're musicians, that I came here to play this instrument, which is, yeah, that's the thing that needs to be counted. Yes, I'm writing for you to play this instrument, but to also do other things that you can do with your body and with your
Yeah.
voice, and trying to find that balanced medium to of comfort. Well, again, if you want it to be comfortable, right? Because there are
Yeah.
those pieces that are not supposed to be comfortable. There,
Yeah. Well,
so
and I think to some extent, like some performers are just being sticks in the mud. Cause like
that is true.
for me, like if I'm rolling up to Wind Symphony rehearsal and like my part says I'm like, so for example, we played Lieutenant Colonel Nowland, the new director of the Marine Band. He has a transcription of Jennifer Higdon's Blue Cathedral that is beautiful, and we played that a year ago in the fall, and there's a part where like all of the or load of the wind instruments are playing reflex bells from China, which are these
Yeah,
spherical bells that you just hold and you just like gently vibrate your wrist or your hand, and they make this really ethereal cool ringing sound. Well, there's like a big section of the piece, like at the end, where euphonium isn't playing anything, but I get to play reflex bells. And let me tell you, that beat's just sitting there by a lot.
that is true.
And like, so
Absolutely.
I don't
And I
get
do
it. Like,
like
there's
it.
some cats where it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, I'm here to play this. It's like, well, I'm including you, so like, come on, let's make music together and let's have a blast. Like, this doesn't need to be
Exactly.
like a high horse thing.
That one thing I would love to see, and maybe there's a piece that already exists that I'll just have to figure out where it is, but like just think about it, talking about playing other instruments, right? Then also it reminds me of the Joseph Schwantner piece, Hills in the Mountains Rising Nowhere with the
Yeah,
glasses, and it makes you
yeah,
wonder, well, imagine seeing a whole string orchestra with those glasses, and you just get hear this, just, oh
yeah.
my gosh. I don't know how. Well, I mean, I would love to try that one day. I don't know. I have to find the right. Again, I overthink though, so I'm probably overthinking all of that. But I feel like there's got to be a right approach to convincing people. Yeah, let's get like 30 plus glasses that have a little bit of water, and let's have our string players play them. Like obviously, yes, because you have to think about logistics of these things too, right?
Yeah. Well, like
Logistics.
that's one of the nice thing. I don't think that you're overthinking it. I think it's a really cool idea. I mean, the idea. I think the thing to do would be find a way to do it at like a low budget. So
Exactly right. It's
like
all about budget.
so like for me, like if I wanted to do a project like that, that seems like doing that with a student ensemble would be really cool because there's probably an interesting amount of pedagogical value that you could add. And like even if you weren't able to recruit a bunch of string players to do it, you could probably recruit a bunch of students to do it that are really happy to be involved. And if it's just one show that you're going to record and then like send out to them so they have it for forever, so they can remember how profound the experience it is, like the experience was. Like I think people would sign up for that.
Absolutely. No, that'd be a cool thing to do. But it reminds me, well, not reminds me, but I want to now get to the what we talked about a while back about, profoundness and challenge, right? Really, complexity in music. Or
Mm,
not. I mean, that sounds so basic. It was something specific about like, it was about complexity, where now it makes me think, well, if I want to be a storyteller, right, where
mm,
honestly anything can go,
yeah.
as long as it's basically, some things can be delivered as simplistic, right? Or other things can work. I mean, sorry, one of the professors at UT hates the word simple. I try and, but I like the word approachable, so I'm gonna try and I really try to lock that word in. But approachable versus, there are ideas that can be best communicated through things that will look will look complex on paper, right? Or complex in terms of the amount of technique required to
Mm,
perform it the way you want it. And of course,
yeah.
again, it's a balancing game. Well, a lot of things are just a balancing game
Yeah.
of finding it. and experimenting. But it's like, well, how would you do that with a story, right? How would you, make people think? But that makes but that goes back to like how I feel like I've been learning little bits and pieces about storytelling through the Finance of Freddy's franchise, and how and Matt Pat's way of theorizing about these and using all the evidence and history and research
Mm-hmm.
to hint at, oh, here are hints that could mean this, but it could not, and the things that are then confirmed in future iterations, and or things that are even more questioned and left people
Yeah.
in the dust, like, huh? What? I thought it was gonna be this. Why is it this now? And I don't know. It's like trying to find the right story. So that's actually an idea I have for my quote unquote dissertation, or it's just some project I want to do in the next 3 years. That kind of like I really do want to write a story. I want to write. It's I've been talking with people. I mean, maybe I'll get some more inspiration from you from this recording, where like about forming a character and getting and but I wanted to be space related. Like problem is like because like oh here, I'll say this. What spawned this idea was this composer. I don't know if you heard of him. Well, he's not necessarily a composer. Shut up. His name's Thomas Bergeson. He also works with this group called Two Steps from Hell. They're like it's a two person with him and a guy named Nick Phoenix. They actually produce sample libraries for East West, uh,
Wow.
like the actual East West like engines and stuff. But Thomas Bergson is the biggest one of that. But he's also a great orchestrator, like fan. Oh gosh, I love his orchestra. I mean, it's heavily cinematic influenced, but it's also with a little bit of Eastern. And nowadays he's delving a little bit with blending with electronics as well.
Mm-hmm.
But there's this album he released in 2019 called American Dream, and it is one of my most favorite pieces of music ever, because is what I think is a giant tone poem, like 45 plus
Wow.
minutes, but it's on. But he writes specifically for Spotify. Like
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever been live performed, because he writes specifically
Oh.
for recording sessions and release in Spotify release. And he has a YouTube channel too, where he also has a media crew. So that'll
Mm-hmm.
be really cool to check out. But there's this album called American Dream, where it's a seamless album. It's like I can't remember the exact number of tracks, but I have the whole thing practically memorized at this
Wow.
point because I love it so much. And the
That's
way he's able
awesome.
to story tell, and he literally starts with a prologue, and then the next track it says embarking and setting sail. Next track is called anticipation, excitement. Later on, it goes into like missing home and can the AS two, where are you? And
Mm-hmm.
then it's like that journey, the passage from to the new world. So because the last two tracks are called Land of the Free and Home of the Brave, and it's that story. It talks about the story of traveling to America, that
Yeah.
optimistic and like, oh my gosh, this a new world, new like what. And he does a great job of blending different contextual styles. Like yes, it starts
Yeah.
with his normal default cinematic like gorgeousness, and then it sets off on this awesome adventurous vibe that just gets you goosebumps going, because his
Yeah.
his contrapuntal, right, like not like counterpoint, like with that counterpoint, melodic counterpoint between him and especially with his cellos, it's just amazing. It is like, I
That's
mean,
awesome.
it's inspired a lot of my orchestration decisions. Um, I don't know, I just love that piece of music so much. So like to
Yeah.
be able to do that, like I want to do something like that. Like I want to
Mm-hmm.
tell, like it literally told a whole story. It told you
Yeah.
exactly what was happening. Like you were
I
able to
think
envision the titles.
I think that storytelling is a really digestible way to make music that's universal,
Yeah,
because even if like the titles are barred by language barrier,
yeah,
um, the fact they're a tether for some people to understand the overall notes of what's happening in the story, or like the loose summary of the story. You get the titles of the sections, right? But
yeah.
so for example, what am I thinking about? I had this idea a couple years ago of writing a concerto based on Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. Are you familiar with
Mm,
this?
I think I've heard of
So
that.
Joseph Campbell is kind of a wild dude, but like he has one of his uh, writings that's way less weird than some of his others, is this book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And what he did was he studied mythology from all over the world and the psychology of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, um, to talk about how there is a universal pattern to hero stories from all over the world. And like it's really interesting, this pattern that he distills it to. It's like loosely 12 to 19 events, um, depending on which version that you look at. And it can be like some of them can be condensed into different ways. But so um, I had this idea of like, well, it would be really cool to do a concerto that's like that, because you're pitting the I mean the classical style of a concerto is a soloist battling the orchestra. And so like being able to tell the story of a mythical hero or heroine that's going on a journey and experiences death and transfiguration and supernatural help and going down a road of trials, and then uh, having to return to whence they came, changed, becoming the master of a world that is real and a world that is supernatural or imaginary, is a really not only profound idea for a story to tell within music, but like something that is inherent, like proved to be universal to all cultures. Well, that's really powerful. And then I thought, like, well, in in telling the story, like how can I make the story implicit rather than explicit? And so I took this idea from George Ligeti of instead of having um, like a three movement concerto that's like fast, slow, fast. Um, I did a bunch of little movements, and that actually helped me a lot, because when you're trying to write a large piece of music, that can be really daunting. But writing six small pieces of music, or in my case, I think I did seven movements, like seven small pieces. Well, if you have seven small pieces and the longest one is 3 minutes and the average duration is 2 minutes, you're probably approximating 18 to 21 minutes pretty efficiently. And then I tried to think about like how could I, and it was helpful having written interior already, because the discovery I made from interior is if you change mode and harmonization and texture, you can actually get an insane amount of material out of one idea. And so then I tried to create the symmetry of like real world and imaginary world through implicitly through the themes that are juxtaposed in this piece. And so like even though it's seven short movements, there's a two movement pattern that passes over it, that's three fast movements, three slow movements, and then a movement of coda where all of these things become superimposed over each other and juxtaposed. And tried to frame it in such a way where the soloist has to inhibit that road of balance between all of these things happening at one time. I'm currently looking for an orchestra to premiere this with, but because I haven't actually got to. Well, I played the solo part. Like I played it with the MIDI, and I have a piano reduction that I finished, but I haven't actually played it with an orchestra yet. But I'm really excited to do it because it's wild music. But the other impetus for this project and why I brought it up as far as storytelling goes is I in my budding interest of psychology that we were talking about earlier. I can't remember if we talked about that while we were recording, but psychology is one of my armchair interests, and one of the things I've learned about it is that the human brain evolved its capacity for language through storytelling. Because I mean, when you think about like ancient humans, writing wasn't something we could really do. I mean, we could carve it into stone or write it in the ground, and one of those takes a long time and is super permanent, and the other one doesn't take a long time but can be destroyed really quickly. And so, but like our collective knowledge that we have through sharing and living in our communities is actually very efficient and very permanent as long as it has very sticky value. And stories are a lot easier to remember than other things. And so it actually it evolved our capacity for storing language and storing knowledge at scale, because it was easier for a community to remember stories. Because you can have, like, I mean, you think about like an early human village having a village storyteller is that's not a weird job. Like I think about that as something like a culture would have. And so like you can kind of be a keeper of knowledge in that way. And was spending time thinking about how profound that was. And at that rate, I was like, well, I would be stupid to write music that didn't tell a story. Not for me personally. I
Mm-hmm.
think people should do whatever they want. But like,
Yeah.
if to me, I was thinking about how like, well, if storytelling carries this much gravitas, I think I would be foolish to write music that didn't have some kind of narrative. And even if it was absolute music, and for any non-musical people listening, what we mean by absolute music is like music that is just music for music's sake, just sounds for sound's sake. I think having something that feels like it has an arc, feels like it has a story, even if it doesn't have one, it creates a situation where people like fill it with meaning even if it doesn't have any. And that kind of gets to like when we were talking about video games, when I think about somebody like a silent protagonist is actually a really interesting concept because when they don't actively say anything, the individual projects themselves into them and they identify a lot with that protagonist because that protagonist hasn't manifested anything. They've just been whatever the player imagines them to be. And I think art can be that way too.
That's I like what you said. I was actually struck by what you're saying about uh not mute but silent protagonist.
Yeah. I mean, you think about like a protagonist in something like Pokemon,
Yeah.
they don't say anything. But you end up having you identify a lot with that protagonist because when they don't have anything, you fill in that meaning. You create the story for them.
That's actually sounds like a really good idea to look into about sound protagonist actually not having any dialogue from the protagonist. Like you have that void to open to be filled by those who experience it,
Yeah.
or like the listener or the audience. It's like, I
Yeah.
want to probably have more conversations with you about this. But I feel like this is probably something like I have a friend group here that we're trying to like I don't know how successful it's going to be because I know I'm going to be gone for a bit, but we're trying to get a D&D session going because
Heck
this
yeah,
will be
man.
like my first time ever having one. I find that oh gosh, I think my old character sheet's gone. I have to remake it. But that's okay. There wasn't much there anyway. And probably maybe get some advice to you about making character sheets, but because I feel like that's gonna be helpful. Like I don't want to say like, oh, I'm only gonna play D&D because it's helping with storytelling. But no, I mean it will help. Like I do want to have fun, lol. But
Yeah.
like hello. But I think just doing that would help me a lot with being that sound protagonist. At least learn how to create a story. Because like you said, you have a really dead story if it's just there's this character and then this happens
Yeah.
and this happens and this happens where like it needs to be some stuff that happens unexpectedly to it was supposed to happen this was supposed to happen but yet we're doing this
Yeah.
instead and then seeing what happens now because of that but it's letting the audience know that no that we're supposed to go this way but now you're actually taking us in a different direction oh so what happens now
Yeah. I've
that's
started to try to think about that in my writing, like my music writing. I think about interior specifically. So the first movement is really wacky because it's this like Alberta Hinestera, Leonard Bernstein inspired dance movement, right?
mm-hmm.
And so like I have the motive that I introduce with like the theme of like the entire piece happening more in the background and it like comes in and out and there are moments when they encounter each other and there's only like I think when the I think it's after the horns play it I introduce this a Balkan dance rhythm instead da 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 and
Mm-hmm.
so like in that juxtaposition so like okay we've had the whole theme but then the Balkan dance happens, and so there's this battle between the Balkan dance and this like Leonard Bernstein, Alberta Hinestera, South American New York dance that's happening, and then like it just go chaos, 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 and it escalates to a point where it's enveloped the entire ensemble until it shatters And that's when, like, right in that moment leading to the saxophone quartet, it's like you're left with this echo empty space where it's filled by melodic instruments sparsely playing the theme and
Mm-hmm.
other instruments sparsely playing the remnants of the dance. So you get this idea of like, well, it's exploded, what's going to happen? And one note changes the key from C Lydian to A Mixolydian, and that's where the um like the strike of the crotale that says we're someplace else happens, and the second movement begins. And in that kind of implicit storytelling of like this happened, but this happened, therefore this happens, well, then what happens next? Well, then you need to have, but this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens, but this happens, therefore this happens. And it actually creates like a cascading chain of events that gets you farther and farther down the road. And having these devices planted, like it, it helps create an arc of a piece that's really satisfying. And it's like,
Absolutely.
it's so funky. And well, and like in terms of just because I've been thinking about this a lot, I'm actually planning a talk about interior for our composer forum a week from Tuesday. And something
Awesome.
I was thinking about, like you'd never guess that that recording wasn't recorded as like a straight through run,
Oh,
not
well,
by a lot.
good job with takes, because I
Thanks,
definitely
man.
could
I
not
mean,
tell.
like
I'm not that I was
so
listening for it.
that recording came together. I think the entire ensemble was in a room together for 2.5 hours over 2 weekends. Yeah, it was a really wild project. We had one rehearsal that was about an hour and a half, and we had a recording session that was an hour and 15 minutes ish. And the way we did it was in the recording session, we went straight through the piece so people could get an idea of the arc of it, but we went movement by movement and we looked at all of the trickiest parts, but we would do like we like did a read and then we would go to do the tricky stuff and then we'd move on, same thing until we got through the piece. And then in the recording session, the so our conductor, Dr. Kevin Giraldi, wizard on the podium. He and I sat down. I think we talked for 5 to 10 minutes just to kind of sketch out what we wanted to do for the recording. And what we decided was the order to do it, and we recorded four, one, three, and then two. And the reason we did that was because the fourth movement, we needed the brass to be the most fresh. The first movement we did next because even though it's not as taxing as far as stamina, it's very taxing mentally because of all of the complex rhythms that happen. And then we did three next because even though three is not as complex rhythmically as one, because there's so, like all of the phasing elements that happen,
Mm-hmm.
in order to create gestures that are really long, they need to be right on top of each other. And then the thing that you really need in order to make movement two happen is just an ear for subtlety. And so like two actually came together really quickly. I think we read it straight down. We went back, caught one spot, and it was done. But like four was a little tricky to put together, and we took the most time on the first movement. But in recording them out of order, we actually and with that kind of a strategic plan of attack, we I think we were able to make a recording that was way better than if we had just sat down and read it straight down by like a
Absolutely.
lot.
Absolutely. You got a really good recording out of it. So
Thanks, man.
I'm
Yeah,
excited for
I
your
was really
next
happy with it.
performance. When's that happening?
It's interior is going to be performed February 29th.
Ooh.
And there should be a stream on the Illinois Band's Facebook page, and I believe the concert's at 7:30. So
All
that'll
right.
be really cool. I'm excited for that. And I'm really excited to hear it in like a big concert hall. I was really surprised. Like, so we recorded in just like our band room, and I was able to get that much reverb in the recording just through like Logic.
Wow.
I was really surprised, but I'm really excited to like feel every hair on my skin stand up when the saxophone quartet and the second movement starts. It's gonna be immaculate.
Oh, it's like one of my again. You have a lot of strong moments in this piece, but
Thanks,
the
man.
one that definitely takes me out is I mean I really do like the. I mean, this is in the first moves when everyone's doing like all out of
Yeah.
pocket stuff, and it's just balance goes through the different instruments. I like a lot of fun. And then of course then it transitions into the Cathedral Lake. And that beautiful sax quartet, and then this whole movement was just just the falling chords, all those suspensions, anticipations, even though they're not, you know, because that's just what I'm going to call them because they kind of are, even if not
Mhm.
looking so harshly,
Yeah.
perfect classical theory. But they, in essence, is what they are. They are a handful. Unless there's more about it you wish to tell me.
It's really funny. A lot of the second movement is just like, um, I didn't think about it very vertically. That's
Yeah,
the funny part. Like,
that's
there are parts of it that are definitely vertical on purpose, but like a lot of it is just that, um, like that theme. It'll be like little sections of it. One instrument will play it, and before they're done, somebody else has started to play it, and then somebody else has started to play it, and then somebody else has started to play it, and then somebody else has started to play it until it slowly evolves into this like beautiful chorus of it. Cathedral Lake Trail at Yosemite National Park is it's a stunning landscape because it's a basin between two cliff faces that is very like a cathedral, and there's huge trees that line it, and the lake is all in the center, and there's a point at the trail where you can look out and you can see all of this, and it's a magnificent landscape. And I mean, there are many churches that have been built around this world, but that is the great one. Is Cathedral Lake National Park, or Cathedral Lake at Yosemite National Park? It's beautiful, and so the movement is trying to capture like all of the intricacy of that beauty that's built out of the landscape. And so, like, what's silly, and one thing I remember about it is like the insects there are so loud, which is why there's that like ambient section of percussion where like all of this stuff is happening and you can hear. I tried to capture like hearing the insects buzzing so that like when the saxophone quartet is supposed to be actually the original saxophone quartet wasn't ornamented so much, and the idea was like, okay, this is the organ prelude of the cathedral at Cathedral Lake, the metaphorical cathedral of Cathedral Lake. And then as I started to think about it some more and thinking about that it needed some more activity, a lot of the ornamentation came from memories of my dad practicing Highland bagpipes at my house when I was a little kid. And like the Highland bagpipe tradition has lots of ornamentation because you can't tongue the reed of a bagpipe. And so you have to create other kinds of articulation. And so some of it was hearkening to my childhood and hearing that and how beautiful that ornamentation is because it's not like a lot of other music traditions. And so, like, well, that can give that a bit of a different sound. And then slowly, as like you have the harmonic progression is the organ prelude that happens sort of looped over the course of the movement, but then as people take up the theme of the piece, that's just now in mixolydian rather than in Lydian mode as it was in the first movement, and it's also a lot shorter, it's more compressed because the notes aren't so spaced out or as extended. So I've used diminution a little bit, and having these things that are exchanged between each other, and occasionally an instrument like I use a Revellion technique where the euphonium will play the solo line that's actually the theme of the movement, but then the flute plays a 12th above and the piccolo plays 2 octaves above that in order to kind of just like sit on the overtones and give it a bit of a different cloud. Ravel uses gestures like that a lot. The really famous one is the horn solo in Bolero. Um, but so like trying to like capture the sound of the instruments and the ensemble carrying this theme in a bit of a different way as and like the euphonium is made sense for a lyrical movement because I find that it's one of the most singing instruments in the wind ensemble. And it's like, well, I mean, I also play euphonium, but like the nobody else uses it. Like brass band, yeah, you get euphonium, but like wind ensemble, like you gotta use euphonium, man, because like it's there. It's not in anybody else. And it's like in talking about like, well, do you know the medium? Do you know how to write for this ensemble? Prove it. Great. Well, you wrote a euphonium solo. It shows that you studied the medium and you know what's unique about it and how to use it. And so that was in part that, but I was thinking about when I was a kid, and there were a number of really gifted singers at the church that my family went to, and so and they were all like really gifted male singers at this church, and so I wanted to capture that spirit and like this this movement about like this church that nature had built. And so, yeah, but to your point that you were talking about earlier, yeah, it's not so vertical. But that's kind of what's beautiful about it, because there are moments of interior that are very vertical on purpose. The first movement, especially, um, and that can be really cool. The honestly, the last movement too, is very very vertical at some points, and that's what gives it the punch that it has. Because like, um, I don't use a first inversion tonic chord for almost the entire last movement. It doesn't. There's not one from the beginning until the coda.
Yeah, that's why it struck me so much when I heard that first position. Yeah, C major, hearing the E in the bass is like, okay.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a bit.
funky. It's funky, but like, well, so I actually learned this from studying some of Steve Reich's music. Reich loves a first inversion tonic chord. And I think the reason is because you get a feeling like it feels like dominant. Because second inversion chord, I mean, obviously, because second inversion chords, your fifth is in the bass. So when you have, but it has like, because I think about the harmonic series a lot when I write. And so when I was working on that movement specifically, I find second inversion to actually be, to me, I know this is like way against like classical pedagogy, but to me, second inversion sounds more stable than first inversion, because harmonically the fifth happens earlier in the harmonic series than the third.
This is a good argument.
And so yeah, so like I just think about it that way. And so like the idea of it, another thing I actually learned from Pines of Rome, because I learned a lot from Pines of Rome, but like the third movement of Pines of Rome is like second inversion for so long. It's like all of these second inversion chords, so that when you finally have the arrival, it's like you just build tension to the point where people are like screaming like, "Oh my God, give us the
Tension.
resolution, please!" And then it's like so powerful to finally have that release of tension and just be like, it's really special.
Absolutely. Wow. Ain't that some?
Yeah, man.
That's so cool. All right.
Cool, man.
It was
I
probably.
think
I think
this
it's
is
probably a good point. Good breaking point for now.
yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think this is a great place to wrap it up. Joe, I really appreciate you being here. Thanks for spending the afternoon with me. You're not gonna believe this. We did 3 hours.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man. I'm
Yeah.
really excited.
Almost 4, bro. If it hits 5, we'll get 4 hours, bro. Break the record. What was the longest podcast you've had so far?
um, the longest podcast I've ever done is actually unpublished. There were
Maybe
well, there were
we'll
a
stop
couple of
recording.
complications, but like some wacky stuff kind of came up, and I just felt like it wasn't worth dropping it. But I mean, we that person and I sat for 5 hours. Like we hit record, and the podcast was 5 hours.
All right,
It
let's break
was
that record. Let's go. First published. No.
yeah. I mean, man, right place, right time. I could go forever. It'd be
Right place,
awesome.
right time.
At some point, I'd have to program in a bathroom break, though.
I'm getting those sirens. I'm getting the call, but no. I would be hugely honored to do this again soon.
Thanks, man.
No, you just let me know.
Yeah,
Just let me know, bro.
for
Say,
sure,
yo,
man. We'll be in touch. It'll be fun.
I'll do this again. No, thank you for having me, Andrew.
You got it, boss.